Let's call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to day 2 of the Montana Board of Regents meeting here at Montana Tech. And once again, would like to thank Chancellor Blackadder and his staff and everybody here at Montana Tech for being such gracious hosts. We had a wonderful reception last night at the Mineral Museum. That was outstanding. Thank you, Chancellor Blackadder. And also this morning we had a great conversation, and I apologize for gaveling the meeting to order a little later than anticipated. We had a great meeting this morning that ran over with community members here in Butte, which was, I thought, an outstanding meeting. Many business folks were there, and that was good. So thank you once again, Chancellor Blackadder. So let's get started this morning, and if you look at the agenda, the first order of business is a board education topic titled DNRC Management and Trust Lands. And I'm going to turn the microphone and the podium over to Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Deputy Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's a pleasure to have with us today Sean Thomas, who's the administrator of the Trust Lands Management Division of the Department of Natural Resource and Conservation. Sean is going to provide a little overview of trust land management, or trust lands within the university system. I have placed on your desk a publication by DNRC that talks a little bit about their program. Also, there's an insert within that book that has a little more detail regarding the trust lands specifically for Montana Tech revenue and then how those revenues are spent for fiscal year 15. On the back of that sheet, it shows the spending for Montana State University in terms of trust land revenues. So I'll let Sean take over and work through his presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for having me. Again, by way of introductions, I'm Sean Thomas. I'm the administrator for the Trust Land Management Division of the DNRC. And I'm very happy to be here. I thank Mick for the invitation to come speak to you today. It's always fun to come talk about trust land management, and especially to folks that are representatives of the beneficiaries that we manage land for. A little bit about me. I'm a University of Montana graduate in forestry. Spent the first part of my career working for the department as a forester, and have been in my current role as the administrator for the division since November of 2011. If I can get this to work. All right, so from the university system perspective, who are the university trust beneficiaries that benefit from the management of these school trust lands? There's actually 5 entities. The University of Montana has trust lands. MSU actually has 2 different grants that we account for separately, but both benefit MSU, the Morrill Grant and MSU's second grant. Tech has school trust lands, State Normal School, which is split between MSU Billings, and which was known to us as Eastern still in our system, and the University of Montana, which was Western at Dillon. Here's a map of the state of Montana, and what are the school trust lands? Where are they? And it's a little hard to really discern much detail when you're looking at maps of the entire state of Montana, but trust lands were given to the states at statehood under our Enabling Act and a few other subsequent acts of Congress. Montana received primarily sections 16 and 36 for the benefit of the common schools, K through 12 education, upon our admission into statehood from Congress, and we are constitutionally managing those lands to generate revenues for those beneficiaries. Originally there was a little over 6 million acres granted to the state. Of that remains 5.2 million acres of surface and 6.2 million acres of mineral estate across all of the different trusts that we manage. It's interesting to note that there's actually 11 different trusts that the DNRC manages for this purpose. Public education, K through 12, is by far the largest, with 4.6 of the 5.2 million acres. And then the 11 others include the 5 university trusts that I mentioned before. If you look at the insets there, you'll see some different colors on the map. So the light blue is the common schools, K through 12. The other colors are represented in the legend. If you look at your handout that's in your packets, I believe you can maybe see that a little better. But what you see is that there's a patchwork quilt of different colors of lands within certain areas. The inset over on the upper left part of the map and the inset on the lower left there is an area near Whitefish, Montana, and the Stillwater State Forest, Cold Creek State Forest, where many trusts are represented, and the university has, in one geographic area, almost all of the university trusts have some represented land ownership there. Here's a breakdown of the acres by the 5 different entities. The brown on the bottom of the bar represents the mineral acres. And so what happened, and I'll talk about this a little bit more on the next slide, but we have the original grant granted to the state a certain amount of acres. Usually it was both the mineral estate and the surface estate. But over time, sometimes some of the surface estate was sold. Mineral estate was almost always retained for various reasons, but mostly because it's difficult to know how to appraise and get a fair value for the mineral estate because you don't know what you don't know. So surface estate occasionally has been sold, exchanged, traded, and that's led to the difference in those acreages in a situation that we call split estate, where perhaps we do not own or manage the surface, but the beneficiary owns the mineral interest underneath. I'd also like to note that MSU Moral Trust is different in that it was a different land grant than the other Enabling Act land grants, and it has specific language in its enabling legislation that precludes management costs from being taken from its revenue stream. So all of the trust land that we manage across the state, with the exception of the Moral Trust, we actually use our revenues to pay for our management costs. Moral Trust, we have to seek general fund authority from the state budget in order to pay the management costs on the Moral Trust. Again, a little bit about the acreage. The acreage has fluctuated throughout time due to land sales or acquisitions, and the mineral acres, it exceeds the surface acreage, again, because mineral estate is retained when we sell lands. This slide just shows a little bit about the total. If we collapsed all the university trusts into sort of one category of use system, we would have about 325,000 acres in mineral estate. 234,000 acres of that remains in surface ownership. The total university system is about 4.5% of the lands that we manage in the state of Montana. We'll get down to some of the finances. Again, the primary purpose these lands were granted to the state was to generate revenues for beneficiaries for education, and we do that a number of different ways. And what you see on this slide was our fiscal year 15, the net distributable revenues that went directly to those beneficiaries across the state. University of Montana, having a smaller grant than some of the others, has a smaller share of this pie, and the other grants being of the same size, interestingly, in 2015, had a relatively proportional share of the distributable revenues as well. I want to talk a little bit about what net distributable revenues are versus non-distributable, because we have both categories that we deal with. The way that this is set up, sort of I look at it from the renewables and non-renewables category. So things that are renewable, i.e. if we have grazing leases where we're selling grass to lessees, those are renewable. Every year we're going to grow grass, and every year we're going to be able to lease that and make revenue for the beneficiaries based on that. Those revenues are distributed then directly to the beneficiaries. If we have a permanent disposition of an interest in the land, either through selling of an easement for, say, a road or a power line, or if we're selling coal or oil and gas and the royalties from that, once we sell that, that revenue stream is gone forever. These endowments were intended to be perpetual, so those permanent dispositions go into a permanent fund that's managed by the Board of Investments, and then the interest from that fund is distributed to the beneficiaries. And so that's what this slide shows, is what those permanent fund balances are by grant and then sort of cumulatively across all of the university systems. Those are the permanent revenues that we've either sold land or sold an interest in land, deposited those into those funds, and then those then are managed by the Board of Investments under the Constitution, and interest is paid. The surface management that we do primarily falls into 3 different programs. We are organized into bureaus within our division. Ag and Grazing is one of those bureaus, and it's one of the bigger programs across the state for all trust land management, and it's pretty proportional as far as the program for the university system. This shows the 5-year revenue trend for both our grazing and our agricultural leases, the grazing leases being the green bars, and the ag leases being the yellow. Of note, in 2011, the Land Board changed the way that we calculate the fee for grazing rates. We sell grazing leases based on a number of animal unit months. That carrying capacity is set by our field staff, and then we have a rate assigned to that that is a multiplier set by the Land Board in rule, and then tied to the price of beef cattle. So the Land Board increased the multiplier significantly in 2011. In combination with that, you see the grazing rates really taking off and actually surpassing our agricultural revenues for 2 reasons. One, the increased multiplier, and 2, really strong beef cattle prices over this 5-year period of time. The grazing rate when I started in 2011 was about somewhere in the $6 and change cents per AUM, and we just calculated next year's rate, and it's going to be 19 and change, almost 20. So we're seeing substantial increases in our grazing revenues as a result of those two things. Agricultural leases are a very much smaller portion of the acres that the Ag and Grazing program manages, but they return a much higher return on a per acre basis. So even though there's not a lot of acres of Ag and Grazing, it's a very good program from a cash return standpoint. It's been flat because of a number of things. We've had some weather-related problems last year, and the markets are beginning to tail off, but we're sort of at the end of a really strong period in ag there, and we've shown really strong revenues from that program as well. Another surface program that we deal with that leads to distributable revenues or non-distributable, that's where the board here comes in. They have the statutory decision to make as to whether or not to distribute timber sale revenues or whether to put them into the permanent funds. That's a little bit unique from this category in statute. But this shows our 5-year trend for the university system from forest management, mostly timber sales and permits. And you can see we had a pretty strong, you all know that we had a really strong housing-related recession in the mid-2000s. We're still feeling impacts of that within our forest management program up until 2012. Things have been recovering pretty solidly in the housing starts and the economics of the timber side. So you see pretty strong returns in 14 and 15. It's not exactly directly related to the current state of the market in any one year because of the way that we do timber sales. Timber sales take a little while to put together and to get into place, and then a purchaser buys a timber sale and has about a 3 or 4 year window of time upon which to do the harvest and to get the sale completed. So our timber sale revenues tend to vary depending on where they are. And for the smaller trusts represented by the university system, you could see pretty wide fluctuations in revenues from timber sales, just depending on what's active and when it's active. Minerals management is sort of our subsurface estate program for trust land management. For the university systems, I guess currently the fact that we don't have a lot of land that has mineral potential is maybe a good thing because the minerals side of our business is pretty strongly declining, as you can see on this chart. However, it's relatively small numbers, as you see, for the university system just because of where those trust lands are located and where we have oil and gas or coal resources in the state. And then the other program, which is sort of the catch-all for everything else, is our Real Estate Management Bureau. The Real Estate Bureau does a lot of really exciting things for the university and other trusts, things like commercial leasing and some new areas for us where we're looking to try to move the map, sell lands that are low-producing assets, put that money into a land banking fund, and buy better-performing assets that are easier, less costly to manage, and generate better revenues for our beneficiaries. We're looking for other interesting ideas, and this chart shows revenues that we've gotten from rights-of-way and easements. And you see in 2011 and 12 is a relatively small number, $50,000 to $100,000 a year that we would have earned from selling people easements for driveways, public roads, utilities, et cetera. In 2013, we put a deal together in an area near Whitefish to sell an easement for recreational purposes where we sold development rights on about 1,500 acres for full market value. We had an appraisal, figured out what the development rights were worth, maintained the rights to do the traditional uses of the land, in this case mostly timber sale activity, and put about almost $6 million into the permanent fund for those beneficiaries that will generate interest in perpetuity from the sale of those development rights. It's a solution to a very complicated problem in a very controversial area, and it's one that's being utilized by folks in different parts of the West to try to get at this management of this public resource in a way that still provides the appropriate amount of compensation for the trust beneficiaries. It was a large lift from a number of folks, including a significant benefactor in the community who put up a lot of money to make this happen. Probably not something that we're going to see frequently, but it was an interesting project and one that has really been sort of a win-win. Other things the Real Estate Management Bureau does is residential leases and licenses. This is what we sort of more commonly known as cabin site leases. It's cabin sites that are on waterfront property, recreational type properties. It's also folks' home sites. We have agricultural homestead type properties where people have been farming on the state land somewhere and they had a home site that was established there a long time ago. We've segregated those out and they fall into the Real Estate Management Bureau's program. And what you see is that we've had steadily increasing revenues in this program from over the 5-year period. We have been working on adjustments to lease rates to try to get these more up to market rates, and that's reflected there. Other leases and licenses, this is sort of the everything else category, and this is where we have some commercial leasing activity. One interesting project that we've done with the university system under our land banking program that I mentioned earlier, we might sell low-producing grazing land somewhere that's isolated, doesn't have legal access, and isn't producing much in the way of a return. We put that money into an account and we look for better properties to purchase. Oftentimes those are agricultural properties. We had the opportunity to pursue a property in Helena a few years ago that was formerly a state-owned building owned by the Department of Administration. We used trust revenue from both the MSU and U of M grants, and we purchased this property with the idea of doing a commercial lease on it. We've successfully launched that project and have a new commercial building being put up on that site, and it's generating about $50,000 a year in lease payment revenue from a property that is probably in the 6% return, versus lands that we sold that were in the 0.1% return. So those kinds of opportunities where we can find them are great opportunities to really have easy revenues generated for those beneficiaries. Trust and legacy interest. So this is the interest off of the permanent funds. This is revenue that is distributed. Every year the Trust and Legacy Fund earns a certain amount of interest, and 95% of that is distributed to the beneficiaries. You can see what the 5-year trend for that has been. Constitutionally, the Board of Investments is fairly limited as to what they can do with that money. They've done a great job if you look at 10, 20-year periods of time and how they've managed that given the constraints that are on them. And what you see is that over the last 5 years, it's been flat. This pie chart shows the gross revenue generated by program, just to sort of give you an overview of sort of how the university trust portfolio looks in the different classes of assets that we manage. Real estate is about half of that chart. It's worth noting that out of that $4.6 million in 15, about half of that was the easement payment for the final completion of the deal near Whitefish. So normally that would probably be more of an equal third, a third, a third sort of an approach. Forest management, real estate, and ag and grazing, with just a sliver of minerals. Just on the diversity topic, just by design of where Montana acquired its trust lands, we have a very diverse portfolio of land assets across the state. Other states are much more at the whim of any one commodity doing well or doing poorly. For example, the state of Washington, almost their entire endowment is in forestry. So when the forest management collapsed in 2007-8, they had massive shortfalls in revenues. Montana, we've been really fortunate in that usually when ag is up, maybe forest management's down, things come and go, and we've maintained much more even flows and have had less crisis management to deal with in terms of the revenues that we're generating and distributing to our beneficiaries. The current chart is just a different way of looking at the last chart in the line graph. You see our minerals program's been relatively steady or flat. Forest management's been sort of up pretty aggressively, and it's just leveled off. Real estate's, due to those big payments for easements, has been up substantially. And the ag and grazing program's been on a pretty steady climb over a 5-year period of time. With that, I have time, I think, for questions. I'd be happy to be available for the board if you have questions for me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll start out with a question, then open it up. About midway through your PowerPoint presentation, you have a slide titled Agriculture and Grazing Management Program, and there's 2 bars dealing with grazing leases and agricultural leases. I just want to make sure I understand. Is there a formula for how those are set? And I apologize if you went over this, but we go from 2001, for instance, on grazing leases at 29 cents, right? 2015, we're at 63. Can you talk a little bit about how we get there?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. So the grazing rate and the agricultural lease rates are set differently. The grazing rate is in administrative rule, and the state land board, I probably neglected to mention this at the beginning, the land board has constitutional authority for all decisions regarding management of school trust land. So they're our board, we present things to them, and they make our policy decisions. The grazing rate is set in rule, it's outlined in rule, and it's set as a formula, as a multiplier. So they set a multiplier, which is tied to the beef cattle price. We query the Montana Ag Statistics Bureau every year for what the beef cattle prices are. They provide a report to us that says this is what last year's beef cattle price averages were. We apply the multiplier to that, and that sets the AUM rate then for the following year. So we just went through that exercise for next summer and came up with a grazing rate that will be somewhere in the, I believe it's 1970 something per AUM. Now, agricultural rates are done, and that's the minimum. We do have some competitive bidding that occurs from time to time, so that sets the minimum rate. The agricultural lease rates are set a couple of different ways. We have generally a crop share approach where we get a percentage of the crop at the end of the harvest. That sets so it's just a percentage rate that's established either through a bid or a negotiated price. We put things out for bid where we can, and sometimes we do cash leases where we just put out for bid and you pay a cash lease price, and that's what you pay to the state. So their ag can be set 2 different ways. And in both cases, I think they're pretty connected to whatever the markets are for the prices of whatever they're leasing. In ag, we primarily are dealing with hay and small grains, but we have light ag leases for other types of crops as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Regent Johnstone.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is there an overarching principle that you're required to either sell or lease at fair market value? Is that the...
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I can't see your name tag.
Johnstone.
Mr. Johnstone. Yes, so the concept that we are managing a trust. So all of the same concepts that apply to a trust manager for any kind of financial trust really apply to the trust land management role that we hold. And so we have to get full market value. It's set in the Constitution. There's language about full market value, and it's throughout statute that full market value is the standard that we're aiming for.
Regent Albrecht.
I would just like clarification on where this hits our budget. Is this proprietary?
Mr. Chair, Regent Albrecht, so I was just going to say, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. So the land board manages the trust lands, but the income off those trust lands are for the benefit of this board. And so there are decisions that come to this board on how we spend or reinvest those proceeds. And maybe, if you wouldn't mind, can you walk us through that a little bit?
So I didn't know if maybe this would be a better question for Mick, Commissioner.
Certainly. Mick's been wanting to talk all
We
day.
distribute the money, and then you guys do with it what you do with it.
And I would just like clarification on where this hits, if this hits on the federal special or proprietary on our budget.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this revenue, I believe, would be deposited in a designated fund. It's not in the current unrestricted fund, but in a designated fund, and it's got specific purposes. If we could, in terms of its uses, most of maybe just look at that handout that I included in that book that was passed out. Most of the proceeds from the trust land revenues is going to debt service for the campus. As you can see at the bottom of the front page for Montana Tech, over half, I think, of that dollar amount is going to debt service. On the back side is MSU, and you've got almost all of it going to debt service. So within the policy that we had with the timber revenue distribution that was on the consent agenda for the budget committee, there is a little bit of I think we have that policy attached to that I think frames some of the limitations on the uses of those revenues. But for the most part, it's used for debt service at the campuses, and really debt service connected with their revenue bonds, so they're focused for the most part on auxiliary activities on the campuses, auxiliary bonds.
Thank you. President Engstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your presentation. My question is motivated by the relative size of the pie dedicated to the University of Montana. Could you just tell me the rationale for those original allocation sizes, and are those reviewable, and who, if so, by who? Is that a regental decision? Is that a state level decision? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, President Engstrom, certainly, and as a University of Montana graduate who is in charge of managing these lands, it's always been a little bit of a sore spot for me that the Congress didn't grant more lands to the University of Montana. So this is based on what was originally granted under the Enabling Act or some subsequent act. And one of the reasons that MSU, as I said, has quite a bit more lands is they actually had 2 different land grant actions from Congress. So those are set by what was granted originally from the federal government.
Additional questions? Additional questions?
I have
Chancellor.
a couple of questions, might get down in the weeds a little bit. We appreciate from the Board of Regents the return of timber sale to the budget. As you can see, we use that money. It's basically, when you look on that sheet, we're using them for dorms, right, to pay the bond on essentially Prospector and Centennial, although there might be some other sources that were used for that money. You know, I support, and it's interesting, I think the Whitefish deal was a good idea to move land that is not usable, or, you know, you're not getting that fair market value out of it. That sort of is an area of the country where, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to be developing it necessarily for recreational uses. I know the public is adamant at times, and that's a controversial thing. So, but I think those are good things to do. I would encourage the board to look at those legal access issues. So if you have land that you can't actually walk on, it's kind of a, you know, it seems a little bit odd, and I think it hurts us on the market, right? So how do you get a grazing lease on something that you can't actually get to unless you're the rancher that is around that land? So that's one thing. And maybe another question that's a little bit more sensitive is maybe a question on the interest rate on the permanent fund. You know, I look at, you know, when you calculate those numbers, it's in the 3.5% range, and you know, we have a specialist here in the investment range. You know, I think most of the endowments that you'll see at universities have been in more in the 8% range over the last 10 or 15 years, and they're invested very conservatively. I think we're only charged 28 basis points for management of that fund. Just some comments on that about how that, for us, if you subtract off, by the way, the $10 an acre that's valued there, I'll double that up if you get ready to sell. But if you subtract that out, right, and you look at that, we're in about the 3.5% range return. What's the discussion like to really, perhaps look at a different investment strategy for that permanent fund? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, Chancellor, is that correct? So the Board of Investments is limited by the Constitution that they can only invest these proceeds in bonds. So they're pretty limited that way. I don't represent the BOI, so real detailed questions for them and what their strategies have been would probably have to be directed to them. What I can say is that over the history of recent years within DNRC, there's been a number of attempts to come up with a constitutional initiative, which is what would be required in order to move that into a different type of investment category. Other Western states, my counterparts in other states, do different things with their school trust endowments. Idaho, for example, has the land board also serves as their board of investments, and they can invest theirs some in equity and other types of markets. So their returns have been very, very strong in the last few years. If you go back through a long period of time, the Board of Investments has, given what they have to work with, done really quite well, I would say, and I've had other financial experts tell me that. But once a permanent disposition is made, that money transfers over to the Trust and Legacy Fund, and that's entirely Board of Investments purview. The State Land Board or the department really don't have any say in how that goes. But we have worked together on trying to get constitutional initiatives. I know of 3 instances when it's been on the ballot in front of the voters, and it's quite frankly failed relatively miserably every time it's come up. So the idea of moving this into the stock market has not played well with Montanans, and I think the most recent attempt at that was in the maybe early 2000s.
Regent Johnstone.
I think that's the correct analysis. This particular fund can only be invested in fixed income. And if you're comparing returns on other foundation funds where they have broader asset allocation ranges, that's possible. Now, in 3 hours precisely, the Federal Reserve may make a decision that will help to increase the interest rate.
Thank you. I don't know if it's of interest to the board to pursue that, because I'm sure Mr. Johnstone would counsel me to have a diversified fund of some kind, right? So it isn't just equities. I don't know. It's something that we might think about. We were talking about that at the breakfast this morning, sort of educating the constituents of the state, the citizens of the state on what is good fiscal management might be something that the board could consider. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions from the board? Regent Nystuen.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, how much more complicated is it these days for you from an oversight perspective, from the standpoint of making sure there's good stewardship of the lands and the water isn't being degraded? I mean, is this causing you to hire additional staff and oversight and monitoring, and are you tangled up in legal issues? You don't get into the weeds on that, but how complicated is it to administer that geographic expanse?
Mr. Chairman, Regent, yeah, absolutely, great question. It's quite complicated, and it seems as though it's getting more complicated all the time. There's listing decisions on threatened and endangered species that are coming out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through my inbox that may be relevant to our land management almost weekly, definitely monthly. Right now, we're facing the sage grouse issue in primarily eastern and southwestern Montana, which is maybe one of the biggest endangered species issues that we've faced in the state ever. In fact, I would say it is probably unquestionably the biggest one that we've potentially faced. We've worked really hard, and the governor established an advisory council, which Trust Lands was part of, to figure out ways to manage for sage grouse. So it's always complicated. I think we went through the most difficult period of this subject matter in the 90s in our timber sale program, where we really had to hire a lot of additional staff and spool up a lot of expert resources in order to do the appropriate MIPA and analysis for all the threatened and endangered species, water quality, et cetera, related to the timber program. So we've sort of gone through that growth, and we're working pretty efficiently in forest management these days. We haven't been subject to a lot of litigation or those types of things in quite some time. So everything's moving along pretty well, but the complexity is ever increasing, and the sage-grouse issue alone could potentially be really a complicated one for us that could require a lot of different approaches to how we look at projects and the staff time and et cetera required in order to get things done.
As a follow-up, I presume that ultimately translates then in potentially fewer dollars flowing into the benefactors of the system, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Regent, I mean, our costs are funded from our revenues.
Okay.
So if our costs go up, then revenues take a hit.
Right.
If we don't find a way to grow revenues as part of that. And most of these endangered species issues and other things, they come at a cost of management and widget output.
Thank you.
Are there further comments or questions from members of the board? Thank you for that great presentation. Appreciate that. We're about 10 minutes away from a break, so my thought is that should we take the break now and for about 15 minutes and then come back? We've got 2 additional committees at that point. Hopefully that'll go relatively quickly. But why don't we do that at this point? Let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll just perhaps adjourn early. Thank you. We will begin where we left off, and it's time now to transition to the Staff and Comp Committee. So I'll turn the floor over to the chair of that committee, Regent Johnstone.
Thank you, Chair Tusk. We have an agenda today that has no action items. They are all consent items. The typical procedure, I think, is to start off by asking the committee members if they have anything they'd like to move from the agenda. I'd like to depart a little bit from that and start off by asking Deputy Commissioner McCray to give us an overview both of the items on the agenda and then maybe an overview of the compensation process that we follow, collective bargaining process, timing, where we are, and all of that. So with that, I would ask Deputy Commissioner McCray to educate us on our agenda before we decide whether we want to move anything from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'll give you a brief overview of the 3 sections of the consent agenda: the staff items, the labor agreements, and the emeriti faculty. And then I'll give you a little big picture overview as to how this agenda is significant or material with regard to bringing some shape to compensation possibilities or outcomes over the next, this fiscal year and next. So the agenda before you has the 3 sections. Staff items is the first section. I will say the agenda is kind of a classic September agenda for the board. Nothing unusual on it. You will see on the staff items, items A through I, essentially consist of reappointments of those administrators who are on annual employment contracts, those administrators who by policy must come before the board for board approval. So as we saw yesterday in the budget discussions, approximately 2/3 of our workforce across the Montana University system is made up of term contract personnel, either faculty or professionals or administrators. There's maybe about 50 contract administrators who require board approval. You have delegated to the commissioner through policy to review and approve the contracts for everyone else. So that's why these folks land on this agenda. So items A through I of the staff items include the reappointments of those certain administrative personnel with no salary changes at their current salary level. Also includes awards of faculty tenure per the regular campus and Board of Regents process and policies. So faculty tenure recommendations begin at the faculty peer level. Tenure meaning retired faculty who, in the view of their peers and their campus leaders, are meritorious to carry the title emeritus. And lastly, the rest of the staff items section, items, I mixed that up, I'm sorry. When we get to the emeritus section, that's the part where retired faculty who are deemed meritorious by their peers and by their campus administrators, that's the emeritus section, the third section. Tenure, that is in the staff items section, you are awarding some tenure to faculty who, by Board of Regents policy and by campus policy, have undergone the rigorous tenure application procedure and have been recommended for tenure at their department, college, university level. So the presidents and the commissioner are recommending tenure to those faculty. So those are included in the staff items A through I. Staff items J, K, L, and M are kind of classic, what I would call policy 407 items. Under Board of Regents policy and under state law, the board must review and approve any certain arrangements between usually faculty and their institutions that involve intellectual property arrangements for shared intellectual property. So these 4 items, when you see a policy 407, it's usually a faculty researcher, faculty who has engaged in university activity with the development of intellectual property. And because a faculty member is doing that in a faculty capacity, when under certain circumstances, when research springs up and expands in the ways that we were talking, for example, under the research initiative discussion yesterday, we have faculty who then maybe also develop a company. So under this policy, the statute says that if a university employee is to serve on a board of a private company or serve as an employee of a private company, then the campuses develop and maintain a plan with that faculty member, including a conflict of interest plan. But because it is technically then reaching the capacity of an employee serving on a board or as an employee of that company, then these are the items that come before the board. And if you look through the individual items, you can see the nature of the research, the nature of the intellectual property, the nature of the agreements.
It also includes equity interest.
Yes, it does. Equity interest, in some cases, shared interest between the university and the faculty member and so forth. The middle section of the consent agenda is the labor agreement section. We have on the agenda 8 items reflecting the fact that in our 24, 25 sets of collective bargaining right now with labor organizations, we have reached 8 tentative agreements between management bargaining teams and union bargaining teams. They've performed a lot of hard work, done a good job coming to agreements, and we have 8 tentative agreements that are in effect. Now, 4 of those agreements have not yet been ratified by the union membership. 4 of them have. Our practice is to not put an agreement before the board for a board vote until that tentative agreement has been ratified by the union membership. So there are 4 of them that are still in the ratification process. We put them on the agenda with hope that they would be ratified by the membership before today. But the 4 that are not, when it comes time to entertain a motion on the passage of the consent agenda, I would recommend or suggest that the motion include, that it be for passage of the consent agenda, but with the exception of items in the labor agreement section, D, E, F, and G. So labor agreements D, E, F, and G, even though we have strong tentative agreements, we have no reason to believe anything is off track there. They just need to be ratified, and we can bring those back at a subsequent meeting. And I'll help remind the committee of that need when we get to that point. The third section, what I should go into as well, but it'll get into the big picture overview that I'm going to give you too about compensation. These labor agreements that you will vote to approve or be voting on for approval, A, B, C, and H, they contain certain mutually agreeable compensation adjustments that the labor and the management bargaining teams reached agreement on. You may remember at the May meeting in Kalispell, we gave a little bit of legislative review of what the legislature provided for state employees and that was a raise of 50 cents an hour effective January 2016 and January 2017. And we reviewed then that the legislature also provided us, the university system, partial funding for such a raise, but the legislature does not prescribe or bind the university system to raises. We determine that through collective bargaining with our labor organizations, and then ultimately, as that starts to take shape with our employees represented by labor organizations, then the board traditionally also decides, whether to extend the same type of raise to faculty, staff, administrators who are not in collective bargaining units. So these items that are on the labor agreement consent agenda, the 4 labor agreements would provide for classified staff raises of 50 cents per hour, effective January of 2016 and January of 2017. So we have effectively, with those specified classified groups, where we have the tentative agreements, negotiated essentially the same raise that the legislature provided for state employees. For the faculty tentative agreements, and that is items G and H, with the Montana Tech Faculty Association and with the organization known as the Montana 2-Year College Faculty Association. That's our 2-year campuses in Billings, Great Falls, Butte, Gallatin College. The tentative agreement there is sort of bifurcated, and that is it would provide for an annual raise of either $780 on the base or 2%, whichever is greater. In the vast majority of cases for both of these faculty groups, the 2% would be the greater raise. So those are the key material economic provisions of the tentative agreements that are before you. Yes.
Point of clarification, on the 2% and the 780, is that 2% on January 1 of 16 and another 2% on January 17?
Thank you. Yes, it is. Thank you. And then for the emeriti faculty section, that is under Board of Regents policy and campus policy, the process whereby retired or retiring faculty who are recommended for the title emeriti because of their meritorious service, the board then approves the emeritus title. So that's kind of the detail of the 3 sections of the consent agenda. In the big picture, a September agenda like this, and including this one, the agenda starts to bring a little bit of shape to some compensation outcomes for the next 2 years. So we are entering into mutually agreeable bargaining agreements. We have a ways to go still, so we're still bargaining with the majority of our collective bargaining units. Negotiations are productive, seeking agreements there. It's our hope that we'll come back to the November meeting with more ratified labor agreements for the board to review. And then at that time as well, we will probably also have a commissioner's recommendation or a question to the board for guidance as to how the board would like the system to proceed with any compensation adjustments for faculty, staff, administrators who are not in collective bargaining units. And like I said, the majority of times in our history, the board has chosen similar treatment of all employee groups. That's basically the context. So the details of the sections of the consent agenda and in the big picture where we are with bargaining. Not everything's answered yet, but we're starting to see some early settlements that they are not absolutely predictive of future settlements because we are bargaining in good faith everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Very helpful, at least for this region. Thank you very much. Do any regents have any members of the committee have any questions for Deputy Commissioner McCray or for anybody else, or any other board members have any questions? President Rosado?
I would like to recommend that since faculty and staff are used to a previous schedule in which by October the 1st their salary adjustments would be notified, that if Deputy Commissioner McRae can write a communication to all the campuses informing faculty and staff about this new calendar.
Yes.
Chair Johnstone, I would like to take a minute to recognize, I spent a little time just kind of quickly glancing through the emeritus professors that are recommended. The 23 is about somewhere in the 800 years of service to the university system. So, while it would be time-consuming, prohibitive to recognize people, I would like to, as a matter of privilege on the campus, perhaps recognize Rod James, who is item N. Rod James is a 37-year employee of Montana Tech, and I mentioned yesterday we have the second oldest environmental engineering program in the United States. Rod James was instrumental in that program, and I would just encourage you to just spend a little bit of time and look through those emeritus faculty and just appreciate 800 years of service listed in those 23 items, and that's give or take, right? I just was scribbling as I went down the list. Well, yeah, math is good. Math matters, as we say. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's older than Oxford, I think, probably. Are there any other questions, Regent Albrecht?
I would like to segue on that, and as a matter of privilege, I see that my former advisor at MSU Billings, where I received my master's degree, Dr. Kay Streeter, is also on this list. And I did take the time to look through all of them, and I just find it a matter of such an honor and privilege to serve now in this capacity, knowing that I have such incredible respect for those who have helped to educate me, but also to help all of us who are here today. So Dr. Kay Streeter, I'd like to give her my acknowledgement and gratitude.
Just so you all know, Regent Albrecht got her master's degree at age 14, so. I actually went through the list as well, and it's very impressive, and it seemed like a large number of retirees, but I don't know whether that's typical or not.
We always don't land the items on the agenda at the same time every year. So it does look like a large list, but I think it's because the Emeriti Awards can kind of float into the Regents over the course of the year. Would that be accurate, Presidents? Or are you experiencing a mass retirement this year? I don't think that's the case.
No mass retirement for sure, board members. And just to clarify, these aren't necessarily all retirements from this past year. Sometimes it takes the unit a year or two to put the recommendation together for the emeritus. So these could be cumulative from more than just this past year.
Thank you. So are there any other questions for anybody have relative to the agenda? If not, are committee members comfortable moving the consent agenda forward? With the noted exceptions relative to the 4 items. Okay. Are there any other items of business to come before this committee? It should be noted that this committee completed its business more quickly than any others. Thank you.
Was there a behind-the-scenes bet on how quickly we could get out of here today? We will now move to the Academic Research and Student Affairs Committee portion of the agenda, and I will be chairing this committee today. Unfortunately, Regent Sheehy could not be with us today, and so I will be doing that. And you'll note that we've also got the 3 sections of the agenda, beginning with our consent agenda, and I think Deputy Commissioner Seck will be joining us here at the table. The Regents have had an opportunity to review the 3 sections, the 3 items on the consent agenda. A is the level 2 memorandum. Mr. Pip candidates is B, and then of course the honorary doctorate, which had some conversation amongst the Regents yesterday. And so, given those 3 items, I would ask the other remaining member, Regent Homan, whether or not he would like to proceed with those consent agendas or pull any to put on the action agenda.
proceed. I have to eat this mic, so it's, but yes, I would like to proceed all of those items.
Deputy Commissioners, anything additional that we should be discussing under consent? I'm assuming not.
Mr. Chair, I believe we are good to go. Everything has been reviewed by the chief academic officers and discussed previously at the Arson Committee.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's move on then. Let's move to the action items on the agenda for this particular committee. And A is prior learning assessment, policy 301.19. And it's my understanding that we do have some folks to address us on this particular issue. Deputy Commissioner?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Just to remind the board, about a year ago, the commissioner appointed a prior learning assessment task force, which was comprised of broad representation of faculty, staff, and administration from across the system. The task force was chaired by Susan Jones from our office, and it met diligently in person over conference calls. They thought they were finished last May, and they met several times over the summer. So we are very, very pleased to welcome Ms. Jones and her guests to present the recommendations. So I'll turn it over to Susan Jones at this point.
Thank you, John. Chairman Tuss, Regents, I'm really, really happy to bring this to you today. This is a culmination of about 13 to 15 months of work, many hours of meetings, as John mentioned, of the task force, but also subcommittees, phone calls, emails, deliberations with faculty on the campuses, reaching out to faculty and staff on each campus from the task force members. PLA is a very multifaceted endeavor, so that is why it took a lot of time. There are a lot of pieces and parts that are different types of PLA that we had to discuss and wrestle and sort of come to terms with on what would make the sense for the Montana University system. Ultimately, what you see before you is what we came up with as far as a common understanding of what PLA should be for the Montana University system and what a common but quality approach should be. It ensures that there will be a faculty-led campus prior learning assessment council. And it also ensures that the faculty will be the ultimate decision makers on credit for students. I think what our big goal there really is, though, is that the adult student has an opportunity to not only be aware of this, but also to consider, especially if he or she has had some experience that may be equivalent to college level learning, that they have that opportunity to try prior learning assessment in whatever form it may take. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to a wonderful key member of our task force, Stephen Laudmill.
Okay, Mr. Chair and members of the board, first I would like to thank Sue Jones for her robust efforts to provide us all the information we needed to put these documents, the policy recommendations together. She did a great job. And there's just a few key points that I wanted to make today. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we learned what I learned as a task force member, why we need to generate this policy right now, talk a little bit about the vetting process, which is really important for a new policy, and a couple of key characteristics of the policy. And so one of the things that I learned as I started studying this, as a biochemist, I teach at the higher end of the academic spectrum. I don't interact very closely with PLA students on a regular basis. So I was coming into it with kind of a clean slate. And what I came to learn is that a lot of PLA is stuff that we already do. We're used to the notion of AP credit, IB credit, CLEP exams. Even transferring credits from another institution entails a little bit of trust that students can get good education out of our seats and still we can count them toward their degree programs. We learned a lot from other states' experiences. We talked to representatives from other states who use PLA and have policy. We learned what works and what doesn't, what's used and what's not. And most importantly for me, and I'm a scientist, I'm always hungry for data, and really the thing that won me over was that when you look and you follow students who come engage in higher education with some kind of PLA credit, they tend to graduate in higher numbers, they persist, they take more classes on our campuses, and their grade point averages are as good or better than the control group of students who don't. Probably these students have fire in their belly, they're motivated, goal-oriented, and even if they didn't learn biochemistry from me, the fact that they succeed in our degree programs is enough to make me comfortable with this concept. So establishing policy right now is important because increasingly students from high school are coming in with dual credit, AP, IB. We've got a lot of veterans who are coming in with rigorous training from the military. We have to have streamlined ways to transcript that learning and apply it toward their degrees, not as just elective credits, but toward their degrees. We have a lot of adults in Montana who have some college education and some learning, but they don't have a degree yet. We're facing a shortage of skilled workers in Montana. We need to engage those students. This could be a recruiting tool. And finally, with Common Course numbering, if we give a student credit at University of Montana for prior learning, we want to make sure that's good enough for MSU Northern and vice versa. So there's a lot of reasons. The vetting was important. Our task force, we had 30 members on there, and we were instructed to take drafts and information about PLA to our home institutions and pass it around and see what people thought. And we did that, and I know I brought these policy drafts to Academic Standards Curriculum Review Committee at Faculty Senate on a number of occasions, to deans, to colleagues. We brought those back to the task force. We incorporated recommendations. In fact, the documents that you have in front of you were modified within the last couple of weeks based on comments from UM's and MSU's Faculty Senate. So I think there's a general level of comfort with the documents that are before you among the faculty that I rub elbows with. Also, the policy, the actual formal policy was written up, I think the first draft maybe by Deputy Commissioner Neil Moisey, and it was checked over and vetted by the technical and legal staff at OCHI. That's what I've heard, and so I think it's a pretty good document. From the task force point of view, it is a synopsis of the larger document. A couple of characteristics of these recommendations: they're largely informational, make sure all of the units are on the same page with definitions and the types of PLA rather than prescriptive, and they allow some local control. There's cases where accreditation in a degree program dictates that students need to be in those college chairs to take that class in order to maintain accreditation. The policy allows for that, so it's not too prescriptive. 3 points I'd like to make about vigilance and going forward are, I think everyone in the room can agree that quality and student success are our #1 priority. And if we see any evidence that PLA or anything else is eroding that quality, that is, we're taking shortcuts somehow and the quality of education is going down, we need to pay attention to that. So let's track PLA students. Let's make sure that they're succeeding in the numbers and in the way that we want them to succeed. We also need to make sure that people who engage with PLA, not just the students, but the faculty, staff, and administrators, advisors, get adequate training for PLA, and we need to pay attention to workload issues. As a faculty, as a subject matter expert, if I'm given a whole lot of assessment to do that's above and beyond my usual job duties, it needs to be recognized, maybe some release time or compensation. But I think we do need to pay attention to any possible change in workload among faculty, staff, and administrators if PLA turns out to be a very big thing. So that's the perspective from a faculty member's point of view. I know you've had a lot of chances to look at these documents, and I would be happy to answer any questions when you have them. And meanwhile, I'll pass it over to Chancellor Nook.
Thanks, Steve. Just a few comments. First, I want to thank Deputy Commissioners Seck and Moisey, who started this work, and then Sue Jones and Steve. But everybody on this task force. These were some of the most engaging conversations that I've seen take place in a university campus in a long time. It was a lot of fun. Everybody came ready to go. There's some big, deep questions that needed to be answered and mulled over, and this committee really did roll their sleeves up and get into that work and find all the details. This subject of prior learning assessment has been around for a long time, and it has a lot of implications throughout the university, and I think that's what I really appreciated about the committee is the way that they really dug into that. I don't want to say anything much more about that, but I do want to call your attention to the remarks by Elizabeth Ingebrigtsen yesterday, because she, I think, took one piece of this and very well articulated some of the issues that PLA and this policy can help us address. We have many students coming to us with credits, with learning, that we have a responsibility as faculty, as chancellors, as staff, to sit down and say, what do you know? Can we assess it appropriately, and if the learning is there at the college level, we can see which course it applies to, we know how it fits with their major, it's our responsibility to credential that learning. So, and that's what this policy is all about. The military, the students coming out of the military have a way to do that through ACE that also often gets them in trouble with their financial aid, because they end up with excess credits, and they get to a maximum number of credits and can no longer access their financial aid. Students coming from other areas have other issues that they run into. This policy was written in a way to try to address all of those and make some sense for these students of how to interact with the system, the faculty, the administration on a campus, and be able to get that learning adequately assessed and then credentialed. Also important in here, and we paid a lot of attention to this, is then can they use those credits if they transfer? What is the transferability of this? That was another big issue. How do we transcript those? How do we physically put them in the record? And then how do we handle that if that student transfers on? So this policy, I think, is a really great way to look at and to provide our campuses with a way to handle that effectively, to get the assessment done, to get the credentialing done, and then get it transcripted in a way that we can handle it across the system. So thank you again. We'd all be very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Christian?
We're done?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Well, I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, thank you all, and thanks to the entire task force. Probably well documented, I'm not a big fan of large task force, but this is some heavy lifting, and it took some time, and I think we really have to get this right. I think when learning has occurred and we can demonstrate that, we need to do the right thing and award credit for that. But when we can't verify that, we need to make sure that we don't infringe on accreditation and quality and all the other aspects that go with that. And so we spent some time on this one. This is certainly an area that the board asked us to move forward in, certainly an area that the governor has some interest in, even to the extent he helped raise a $350,000 grant for PLA that was announced a couple weeks ago in Great Falls. And that will really, I believe, help us take this effort to scale. So I'm very excited about where we're going with this. I really do appreciate, in this instance, I don't want everybody to think I like 30 people committees, but in this instance, I think we did the right thing, and we took some time on this, and we made sure that we had the proper input from faculty, and that is the heart and soul of the keepers of quality, as we talked about at breakfast, and that's a role that I believe in and that we need to make sure is maintained through PLA. But PLA can do some good things for some good people. I want to make sure that we move that forward, and at the same time thank the governor for his interest in this and the grant that he helped us get. I believe it really will move this into the mainstream for us now in Montana. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further comments or questions? President Cruzado.
I wanted to thank the faculty who have been involved in this task force. This is a monumental task, and it's a good moment for reflection, for us to go inside ourselves and take a closer look at our academic requirements. And it's an incredible, difficult task. I think also they need to be commended because this new policy also walks hand in hand with the statewide effort that the Montana University system put together some years ago about common course numbering. And it's so important for us to continue to advance these goals that our people are telling us this is what we want from our campuses, to make sure that we protect academic rigor, but at the same time that we remove barriers from our students' progress towards their degree. Common course numbering has been an incredibly difficult task. There's still some confusion out there, and it's something that we need to count on the faculty's goodwill in order to make sure that every day we continue to make progress on these two efforts. So thank you so much.
Regent Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. I guess my first question is, especially applicable to military cases, is training that's happened that's going to be applied towards PLA credit from some type of institute or formalized training program, such as in the military, are those at some point going to be standardized so that you know if a student passed through a certain military course that they're going to get PLA credit for that, or are those cases always going to be reviewed individually?
Thank you, Regent Holman. That's really, I think, up to the individual institution, right? This policy is a framework policy that says institutions operate under this guise. I think on some campuses, there could be certain courses within the military training that says, once you've completed this course, we know we are going to award you credit for this, right? Personally, I like the idea of going ahead and going through the assessments. This is about assessing the learning. In some extent, then, what we would basically be doing is transferring those credits and saying this training is the same as this course, or it will transfer in as that course. So personally, I'd like to see the assessment still be given, but the student would know exactly what course they're going to be assigned that credit, and that'd be a big step forward from where we're at right now, where oftentimes on one campus, those get thrown into a general electives credit, not even a course. Other campus, it may be assigned to a course. And maybe even on some campus, it's assigned to multiple courses, depending on how it goes. So this policy doesn't force any of that to happen on any one campus. It leaves the flexibility in the hands of the faculty to determine how best to handle that.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'd like to commend the committee and the Commissioner's Office for their work and the significant involvement they had with faculty. As faculty, we're the gatekeepers of quality education, and I think one concern that we had is that the PLA credits, students that got PLA credits, successfully go forward, and I think the final policy we got there. I think it's very good, very good. One particular item was the PLA credits will be clearly marked on the transcripts. And I think this is very important for us to be able to track the students and advise them appropriately, and that's included in the policy. So we support the policy.
It is a big deal, very big deal. Thank you very much. Regent Holman, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just one last question. I understand the transferability part of this, and my question is this going to have any effect with students who transfer out of state? Will those PLA credits still be applicable?
As a person who was recently in one of those other states, it's going to be up to those institutions. My feeling is they should go, and I've never had any problem bringing them in, right? And I say that as a faculty member, not as an administrator. But it's like transferring anything else. One of the things that will be in our favor here for our students who decide to go to another institution out of our state is these will be transcribed as a course for the most part. That's what we're really recommending, that as much as possible transcript these as a specific course. Courses are relatively easy to transfer across state lines and the private-public void that's there sometimes. So we're in a much better place than we are right now, where these might just be going in as general ed credits. general credits, not gen ed, general ed credits. These will be a course. Those are much easier for these students to transfer.
Very good question. Regent
Could
Holman.
I pipe in just one more thing? What we would hope, well, as a faculty member, what I would hope is that the institution that's considering accepting these credits takes this decision as seriously as we do. And if they do, that's the right thing. And, you know, I mean, if in a situation we saw that some kind of AP credits were routinely not being accepted, it would make us take another look, well, what's going on with this particular course that students are getting for PLA credit. So we hope that the institutions that the student is transferring to are taking this assessment and credentialing as seriously as we are.
Additional questions or comments from members of the board?
Moving forward, and again, thank you for your incredible amount of work and diligence on this. It would be natural that there would be some need for adaptations moving forward. How will this be reviewed and addressed moving forward in order to make necessary tweaks? Will that just come to you, Dr. Seck, or?
Mr. Chair, Regent Albrecht, once this board has approved these policy recommendations, the commissioner will appoint a PLA council that will be faculty-led, administratively supported, very much like the Math Pathways Task Force is. And that council will be working with the campuses to implement the policy and as necessary, fine-tune it if it's needed.
Regent Eystun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of a question designated to our friends at the community colleges. Is this something that you've been involved in, or is this of interest to you as you move forward?
Mr. Chair, yes, we have been involved. Yes, we have been involved in this process. We have been involved, and we are interested in doing it through our processes, but coordinating with the board of regents.
Thank you. Could you give us just kind of the context of about, and it's tough to define a typical student, but how many credits might come as a result of this analysis, this work? Is it somebody walking away with 6 credits or 24?
Could be a lot more than that. Yeah, it all really depends on what the person brings in. You know, we have several students, a lot of our students right now are bringing in what are in here PLA credits. We call them AP or IB, International Baccalaureate. But in addition to that, military credits, military oftentimes are bringing in excess of 20 credits, and now largely unassigned. So this will help that out. I think as more and more people engage with some active electronic learning, this is going to grow. You know, I know of examples of people who have brought in an entire degree. This doesn't allow us to do that, all right? There is a limit of 25 credits that can come in through, it's 25%, excuse me, not 25 credits, 25% of a degree can be transferred in. And that limit is set by our accrediting agency, the Northwest Council. So we are limited in that way.
A follow-up. So potentially, could somebody, let's say, go out to a Khan Academy or some of these online, these types of programs and study
Absolutely.
really hard and learn as much as they can, come in and...
That's absolutely true. And, you know, sit down and learn history somewhere. And that's one of the examples we actually talked about on the committee quite a little bit, is someone who is, you know, just gung-ho about history, who spent a lot of time reading and studying and wants to sit down and test out of History 101 or 202 or whatever it is. This gives them the option to do that. I think the Khan Academy is a great place where a student could, who's very interested in this, learn, you know, definitely through calculus in that environment and come in and ask to test out of that. Now there's a policy framework for them to do that. So I think as the electronic age continues to mature, we're going to see more and more of that happen.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, we've sort of talked about it, but for everyone's benefit, the nuance of this policy that is so beneficial is very similar to, as the president mentioned, common course numbering, in that we used to get lots of complaints, well, our credits don't transfer. And our answer was, well, yeah, we transfer them. But as Lynn Hamilton, former regent, used to say, they transfer, but they don't count toward your degree. And that was the crux of the problem before. We would transfer them as general credits. You can only have so many of those. The beauty, I think, of what common course numbering has done, and ultimately what this is starting to do, is it transfers a course that counts toward a degree. It really will change the landscape beyond what we've had, and that's why it was so important, as it was in common course numbering, that we had faculty involved from day one to make sure, as we accredit these as a course completed, that we're meeting the goals and objectives of those courses. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but the shift here is pretty huge, and that, I think, ultimately will bode extremely well for our students.
Mr. Chair, one comment about some work that we've done in here. The committee, a few of us from the committee met with the president and deputy president at Northwest Council of Colleges and Universities to talk about the 25% cap. And in the way this policy is set up, we've done something that's unique that they really appreciated. And the people at Cale who were working with us as well saw as sort of a big step. We've taken and identified AP and IB and these other learning strategies that happen in high schools as prior learning, because they're not happening on our college campus or on a college campus. We said they're prior learning, but they're instruction-based. And they're sitting in a classroom, they're learning, we know how to work with those. They don't count towards a 25% cap. We've set a policy that's very clear that while they're PLA, they're not in underneath this accrediting body's 25% cap. And then we defined exactly what sort of PLA does fit underneath that cap. So between things like AP and then coming in and testing out, taking CLEP exams, we will be able to bring in more than 25%, a student could bring in more than 25%. As the accrediting agency and Cale, this national organization, have really been impressed with some of the steps that this committee and this policy sets up.
Regent Johnstone.
Thank you, Chair Tuss. I'm very supportive of this. The one comment I would make, and I think I made it when you gave your presentation 6 or 9 months ago, is this does represent a fairly significant change in the way in which we approach education. And I would encourage us to walk before we run and be prepared to make adjustments in the policy as we learn. And I suspect we will learn things, and they may require some fairly significant modifications in the policy.
Further conversation? Further questions? Yes.
I also just wanted to make note of the fact that we did share this policy document with the tribal colleges in the state and the private campuses. And I know Carroll College was very interested in it, and also I've been in touch with a couple of the tribal colleges who, if this passes, would like a copy of this document because they're very interested in following suit. So we're very excited about that. And also, again, with the grant that the governor helped us get, we have things coming up such as understanding military training, looking at possibilities on military specialty training and into the healthcare occupations. We'll have a workshop in Bozeman on that. We also will have 2 faculty assessor trainings, an advisor training, and some other things coming up. So we definitely, would be the infrastructure building. It's not everything, but it's a great start. And I'll encourage all of you to make sure that you have some folks in those trainings because they are part of that grant. They would cost a lot of money if you were to do that independently, but this is part of the grant and it's paid for. So thank you.
Thank you. Further conversation? Dr. Sack.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I just once again want to really acknowledge the incredible work of Chancellor Nook, Professor Lodmill, the entire task force, and especially the leadership of Ms. Jones. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a wonderful presentation today. We appreciate it very much. Thank you. Let us now move on to the second item on our action agenda, revision to policy 401.1, consulting services, faculty, OCHI.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is really a very simple change. The Board of Regents of Higher Education are asked to revise policy 401.1 to change the submission date of the annual report from October 1 to December 31st to better align with campus reporting.
Thank you. Any questions about this from members of the board? Doesn't appear to be. Okay, thank you very much. Action item C, mission statement and vision statement revision for the college, or Great Falls College MSU.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I would like to call on Dr. Susan Wolf, CEO Dean of Great Falls College, for this presentation.
Good morning. I was before you not too long ago with what we said was our whole mission and vision, everything we had to do in alignment with what the Regents' policy and time frame is, but said I would be back soon because as part of the accreditation process with the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, we had our Year 7 visit in April. We now have our Year 1 report due in the spring, in January through March of this upcoming year. So that gave us the opportunity to look at that vision and mission, et cetera, that I gave to you before to say, is that really who we are today? Because that had been developed several years ago. We wanted to have a mission statement that was memorable. Too often mission statements are way too long. I could never remember or tell you what our previous mission statement was, so please don't ask. I could read it, but I wouldn't know it off by my heart. So in an effort to more precisely reflect the college's emphasis on student success, we engaged in a campus-wide effort to restate our vision and mission statements as well as new core themes, and we're working on the indicators. And you saw the result of that process. But what I want to say is how we got to this, to the new vision and mission. It was very involved. We had community people involved. We had over 30 listening sessions all across the campus. We also have our college planning budget and advising council, and that is faculty, staff, and students and administrators. And our faculty senate were involved, and then to the executive team. So what I present for you today is our revised vision statement. The vision of GFC MSU is to strengthen communities through excellence, innovation, and collaboration. That's what we're going to do, and it's what and how. And our revised mission statement, the mission of Great Falls College MSU is to educate and inspire you. Now, what we wanted to do from that is look at our core themes, which is what is required by the accreditation process. And again, we wanted to shorten those down to have fewer of those so we could really stay laser focused on what we do best. And our two core themes are educate and inspire. Under each one of those, the objectives for educate are academic preparation and completion, and to inspire, it's retention and access. And so this goes along with our performance-based funding. And again, when you really look at what student success is about, it is to help our students get where they need to go, what their goals are, and to achieve those. We do plan on bringing our core indicators back in the November meeting, but we wanted to get a little bit of a head start on the new vision and mission to start using in our marketing materials and branding materials, and we needed to have your approval of these. So I stand ready for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dean Wolf. It's my opinion that this particular board has taken more interest in vision and mission statements of our particular units than certainly since I've been on the board. So we do take this stuff very seriously. One of the things, and perhaps a question that I have for you, is how important is it to get this right in terms of what you offer and what you don't offer, and how the mission and vision statements of your particular institution reflects the community that you're in and the constituencies that you serve. We talked a couple meetings ago about a particular mission statement being too broad, too generic. You could fill in the blank, and it would work for anybody. So I'm curious about your take on this, because again, unlike any time that I've been on this board, we're kind of digging into these things.
I think if you, and that was a question we had, and we struggled with that, because if you look at the previous ones, everybody's voice was in there, and that was, always important. People wanted to see themselves reflected in those statements, and everybody that we served. But we also said, if we can't have a mission statement that's across a T-shirt, it's like Nike, just do it. And it's, it has become it was very bold, and it has been memorable, and they still use it. So we look at the community of Great Falls. We see ourselves as an institution as being a very key partner in developing a vibrancy in the local economy, workforce development, in providing education to our constituents. And we felt that how do you build those communities? And it's through excellence, innovation, and collaboration. And we have, as I think everybody here knows, very strong collaborative partnerships in Great Falls, and we wanted to reflect that in our statement. The excellence and the innovation, we always want to be on the cutting edge. We want to be flexible and nimble to meet the needs. I think we reflected that when ADF International said they wanted to come to Great Falls. So we did take a strong look at who we are, how we serve our constituents, and we felt that this reflected that. And then with the mission statement, again, we have to inspire our students in order for them, first of all, to come to us, to stay with us, and to complete. And we do that through the educational process. So we had very deep and very thoughtful conversations. I also want to thank our faculty and certainly our staff and administrators. They were very involved and had good conversations, and they feel really good about these statements.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the board? There doesn't appear to be. Thank you, Dean Wolf, very much. Let's now move into, Dr. Seck, the information part of our agenda. And the first item up is Sloan presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. With us today, we have Dr. Aaron Thomas, Associate Professor of Chemistry and Director of Indigenous Research and STEM Education at the University of Montana. He is here with us to make a presentation and introduce 3 graduate students.
Chairman Tuss and members of the board, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Aaron Thomas. Again, I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of Montana, and I'm also Director of Indigenous Research and STEM Education. And today I have with me, they're coming, 2 of our students. Come on up. That's right. I have with me Ronalda Sotzi. She's from the University of Montana. We also have Shanara Spang-Guion, also here from Montana Tech. We have one other student that hopefully will be joining us soon from Montana State University. And so as you can see, this is a very collaborative project between the 3 institutions. And so what I will do is I'll give a little background on what the Sloan program is about, and I'll give our students a chance to talk. That doesn't seem like the first slide.
It's on.
There we go. So a little background on the Sloan Foundation. Some of you may be familiar with Sloan. So Sloan is a nonprofit grant-making institution. Its home base is in New York. It was established in 1934 by Alfred P. Sloan, Jr. At that time, he was the CEO of General Motors. And the foundation supports original research. Also looking into education, looks into STEM fields, and also economic performance. Some of the areas that they fund include basic research, public understanding of STEM and economics, digital information technology, and also higher education. And so what we do here in Montana would really fall under the higher education portion of what they fund. So I'll give a little background on why this is important. So it's kind of off to the side a little bit, but that says degree aspirations. And so if we're looking at American Indians and Alaska Natives and what they aspire to do, on that left-hand graph, that says actually degree aspirations for a bachelor's degree. So from 2004 to 2012, the aspirations of those that are expecting to get a bachelor's degree rose among our American Indian students from 27% to 43%. However, if we look on the graduate side, those are looking to get a graduate level degree, whether that's a master's or a PhD, well, those that expected to do that actually decreased over that 8-year period from 59% to 39%. So less of our American Indian students are looking to get their graduate degrees, however, even though more of them are looking to get their bachelor's degrees. So if we looked at the total number of doctorates that are awarded in 2013, that's about 53,000 were able to get their overall in the U.S. If we look at those specifically in the STEM fields, that's about 37,000. If we look at American Indians, Alaska Natives, 119 total doctorates were given to American Indian students, which is actually down from 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, in 1992, we had 149 doctorates and awarded to American Indian students. And 20 years later, 119. So we've made great advances with the Hispanic population, with the African Americans. Those number of doctorates have actually increased over the past 20 years. The percentages have actually even gone up. With our American Indian students, they've actually gone down. So we're heading in the wrong direction, in my opinion, with our graduate students, American Indian graduate students getting their degrees. If we look at those specifically in STEM, that's only 59 students in the entire country, or 0.16%. So I'll give some history of what Sloan has done here in Montana. So we began in 2005 with the University of Montana and Montana Tech as part of this program, with MSU that joined in 2011. And actually, I'm going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about what Sloan does. Well, Sloan, what it does is actually help assist our graduate students in getting their, Native graduate students getting their master's degrees and PhDs in STEM fields. And where this is really important is it tends that most of our Native graduate students are a little bit older. They come with families, so they have extra added responsibilities and expenses. They have expenses such as, well, daycare, or having to support the household and having to get a little larger home because they have a larger family. And so Sloan enables them then to focus completely on their work. So they don't have to go out and get a second job to support their family. They can focus on completing their graduate degrees. So we began here with this program at the University of Montana and Tech at 2005, with MSU joining in 2011. We've had, I believe that's 27, the numbers on the side, 26 graduated in the program. Thank you for that prompt over there. 26 graduated in the program. In 2005, we had 20 from U of M that graduated with their master's degrees, 7 graduated from Tech with their master's, and 3 from Montana State. If we're looking at PhDs, so far we've just had 6 PhDs that graduated, and all those have been from the University of Montana. 26 students are currently in the Sloan program this year between the 3 universities, with 5 new students that are entering this upcoming year, starting here in the spring. The current stipend that we have for our students, again, this is to allow them to be able to focus on their studies. If they're getting their master's degrees, this is $20,000. Now, this is not necessarily $20,000 a year. This is $20,000 over the entire lifetime of their master's program. However, if they continue on for their PhD, this then increases to $40,000 over their lifetime of their PhD program. Where this is also important is this money is a supplement. It is a supplement to an existing TA that they have, an existing RA or existing GA that the student has. The reason for this is essentially we don't want it to seem like a department or a faculty is getting a free student. Oh, a free student, that's great. No, actually you have to put some support into the student, either through a GA or a TA or through some other means. Then we'll supplement that with the Sloan money. In the past, the Montana University system has had to provide a baseline. It used to be 2 baseline students, but now it's been 1 baseline. So what does that mean? Well, for each institution has to support 1 student as if they were a Sloan student. And that money then would go to the students, not from Sloan, but from the university itself. So this past year, the University of Montana supported 1 complete Sloan student. Tech will be doing that this year, and then MSU will be doing that the following year. And this is actually a requirement from Sloan that they then have. So what are some of the program activities that we do with our Sloan students? So we have professional meetings with them. We meet about once a month. So at the University of Montana, I meet with our students about once a month, usually around food. That's a great way to get students to come in. And we do professional development with our students. We've done things like we've had the library come in and talk to them a little bit about using SciFinder or having their references in order and how to look up different type of documents. We've done things such as had resume workshops and interview skills with them. So we meet monthly with them, or we have a faculty come in and give a presentation, or a student themselves will give a presentation. So perhaps they're about ready to go and give a talk at a conference, or their dissertation is coming up. Well, that's a chance for them to practice with us, and we'll give them feedback so they'll be ready for their other presentation. We encourage each and every one of our students to apply for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, a very prestigious fellowship that if they're able to attain that, not only does that help them in their graduate studies, but also as they continue on in their careers. Between the 3 universities, we also have at least 1 joint meeting each semester. Usually it's centered around here, as this is somewhat equidistant from the 2 campuses. And we invite all of our Sloan students to come together, and we do some more professional development with them. But then we have them present to each other. We try to build community among our students. It's nice for them to see what other students are doing, and also to understand that they're not alone. They're not the only ones that are struggling or doing well in their graduate studies. We also have 1 joint meeting. So Sloan is not just the 3 Montana institutions. It also includes 3 other schools: Purdue University, the University of Alaska, the University of Arizona. So once a year, all of the Sloan partnership universities get together and they meet at the ACES National Conference, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, which occurs every year at about the November timeframe. So there we combine all the Sloan programs together. The Sloan director also comes down, and we have a chance to then meet each other, again, some more professional development with them in conjunction with the conference. But something that's also very exciting is the success of Sloan in Montana helped us be successful in winning a major NSF award, the AGEP award. This is the Pacific Northwest Circle of Success for Mentoring Opportunities in STEM, or the PNW Cosmos Award. And this is an alliance between the 3 Montana universities, University of Montana, Tech, Montana State, Salish Kootenai College, University of Idaho, Washington State, and also Heritage University. And so this is involved in a mentoring program to not only mentor our graduate students, but to mentor their advisors as well. And we're about in the first year of that program, and so far that has gone very well. So here are the universities that are represented. So again, University of Alaska with both Fairbanks and Anchorage, University of Arizona, Montana Tech, Montana State, and the University of Montana. Sloan again is located in New York, and also Purdue University. So that's enough background on my behalf. I would like to introduce some of our students and have them talk a little bit about what Sloan has meant to them. And with that, I will start with, on my left, with Ronalda.
Yeah, Chairman Tuss and Regents. My name is Ronalda Sosi. I'm Dene from Sweetwater, Arizona, so part of the, also called the Navajo Reservation or the Navajo Tribe. I am currently a master's student in the Interdisciplinary Studies program at the University of Montana. My focus is in chemistry and environmental science and studies. So I just finished writing my thesis, and I will be defending in November. It's been a tough ride since I've came to Montana, and I brought my family up with me. Just like Dr. Thomas said, I'm a non-traditional student. I have 3 girls, and at all different ages, elementary, middle school, and high school. And Sloan, without Sloan, I probably wouldn't be in the program that I'm in. It has helped me gain confidence in my ability to do science. It has helped me realize my potential to do science and to be a scientist and to be out there and solving problems, especially environmental problems. You all might have heard about the Animas River spill, major contamination to water sources on my reservation, and the technology that I'm working on in my research that I've done so far and that I will be continuing to do in the interdisciplinary doctoral program will hopefully help remediate some of that contamination. And I'm just happy that Sloan has been there since I've started at UM. It helps me pay my rent for the whole semester. It helps me pay my rent for the whole year. And it allows me to have that peace of mind, to not have to worry all the time about finances. And although I do have a TA, it's enough to pay whatever bills that I also have, but it's enough to not only support my family, but without Sloan, I honestly believe that I would have just pursued a career after my undergraduate degree, and I wouldn't even be standing here in a few months defending my thesis. And I'm so proud of that, and I'm so thankful that we have programs such as Sloan that is able to provide support for students, Native American students such as myself, especially those that are interested in science. I believe that my ultimate goal is to return to the reservation. It doesn't matter if it's my own reservation, to a reservation to teach. And I want to be able to teach at the tribal college level, to encourage other Native students like myself that struggled, other non-traditional students, other traditional students, but Native Americans specifically, to help them see the potential, their own potential to do science, just like I saw that in myself, and I want them to realize that. So I'd like to start a mentoring program, just like I have gone up through in my undergraduate years, that I want to start an undergraduate research program at the tribal college level, which I think is vital to success from making that transition from a tribal college to a 4-year college. As you all know, there's a lot of failure, students that really don't succeed, that go from tribal colleges to a 4-year university. So it is my goal to change that. I want to be able to mentor these students and provide them support to get through those issues and to overcome all the negativity that comes along your path, and as through you're going through your education. And I've seen all of that, I've experienced all of that, and I've gone through it, and I think by the time I'm done with my PhD, it's time for me to give back to my community and other Native nations. Thank you.
Pivawana, good morning, Chairman Tush and members of the board. My name is Shanara Spangion, also just call me Shani. Again, similar to Ronalda, I am also a non-traditional student. I come from the Northern Cheyenne and Crow Nations in southeast Montana. I was raised in Lame Deer, Montana, and graduated from Lame Deer Public High School many years ago. I am a mother of 2 children. I am a wife to my wonderful husband, Jake. And for the past 9 years, I worked for my tribal government in natural resources management and water resources management. I learned about the programs here at Montana Tech and about the Sloan Fellowship at a workshop in the summer of 2014 that was held at Cornell University. I met Bev Hartline there, and we laugh about how we basically traveled all the way across the country to meet each other when we were only about 5 hours apart. As a result of that meeting, I visited Tech last fall. I did a campus visit. I got to meet with a few folks, including my advisor and chair of my committee, Glenn Shaw, who is here supporting me today. And after that visit, I thought I would just give it a shot. You know, I had been working for my tribe for a number of years, and I got really good at administration, about writing grants. But I felt like I lacked that technical side to really understand groundwater and surface water, for instance. So that was sort of a motivation for me to come back, is to really understand the science behind what informs policy and management decisions, and especially as that pertains to my tribe. While my application to Montana Tech meant I would likely be splitting my family apart, I currently live here with my daughter. She's 7 years old, and my husband and my son, who is 9, they live back home 5 hours away. My husband was very supportive. After all, I had been talking about graduate school since my daughter was born, so I'd been talking about it for 7 years. The Sloan Fellowship and that opportunity, I felt like, was really the final push for me to make my graduate school intentions a reality. The support offered by the Sloan Fellowship and by the people who administer it, people like Bev Hartline, Carlene Hu, and Dr. Thomas, their support also gave me that final push and was crucial to my choice. They reviewed my application, they saw the potential in me, and as a Native student, re-entering the education environment after a 10-year break, that meant the world to me. I deeply appreciate their continued support and belief in me. So although it was not an easy choice to leave home or to give up a regular income or to live away from my husband and son, all to pursue the average college student life, I am so glad to have made that choice. This fellowship has allowed me the flexibility to pursue my educational goals. So here I am after 7 years of talking about it, and I am a graduate student, new student in the spring, new Sloan Fellow in the spring. I am studying hydrogeology and technical communications under the Interdisciplinary Master of Science here at Montana Tech. My hope through my thesis work is to integrate my tribe's traditional ecological knowledge and worldviews with Western science in identifying ground water and surface water interactions along Rosebud Creek. That's a major watershed on my reservation and drains approximately 2/3 of our land base. And not only does it drain our land base, but it's a shared water. Watersheds don't know political boundaries. So I'm hoping my work will inform or at least educate our tribal government officials and help inform their policy and management as it surrounds water resources. I thank you for your time.
Good morning. First of all, I want to say what an honor it is for me to be presenting to you all. I am very excited. I have been looking forward to this, and it's also made me a little nervous, but I'm happy to be here. My name is Lisa Lowenfeit. My Indian name is Woman Who Takes Care of the Wind. In Hidatsa, it's much more complicated than that, but in English, that's what it translates to. I am Mandan Hidatsa and Arikara from the MHA Nation, or the Fort Berthold Reservation, located in the political boundaries of North Dakota. And we sit right on top of the Bakken. My grandfather, Goodbird, was born on the rims of Billings, Montana. So, you know, those boundaries, why I say they're political, is they they were not ones that we knew. So this is part of our land, this is part of where our earth lodges were as well, certainly Montana, so I feel very at home in Montana. I'm sorry, I have a frog in my throat here. You're so nice, thank you. Appreciate that. Before I came to Montana State University, I was the director of the Wind River Native Science Field Center, and I love my job. It was great, worked with students to combine traditional knowledge and GIS sciences and help them to hopefully go into science careers. And as I was there, they have oil development, energy development, as most of you might know, happening there in Wyoming. And we started doing different projects with the students, and because of the impacts it was happening, that it was having on the health of the individuals and the land and whatnot. And I was a little naive, and I thought, I'm so happy I'm here, but this is happening on my reservation, and I need to go back and help my reservation, give back to my reservation. And so that's when I was looking for a program. I didn't want any program. I wanted the program that could give me the skills that I needed to go and truly make an impact on my reservation. And I searched long and hard, and I was actually considering Purdue. And I looked at Montana State University, and I said, that's it, that's where I want to be. So I'm in the Department of Land Resources and Environmental Sciences. My area of research is remote sensing or spatial sciences. And my research topic is using Landsat to look at land use, land change on my reservation from 1970 through 2010. And so what Sloan has allowed me to do is I originally came here on some funding to Montana State on funding, and that ran out, which funding does sometimes. And I thought, oh, okay. The only thing I've ever known is I need to go back to work. I'm going to have to stop out and have to quit because I have 5 kids, and most of them are off in college, but still had one at home, and I didn't have many choices. And my husband and I talked, and he said, hey, you can finish up later, that sort of a thing. And the grad school introduced me to Sloan. I was so grateful. There was no pause in my my education. I went forward. And I am just so grateful to the Sloan team, to Dean Hu, Dr. Thomas, and Dr. Hartline. They have helped us along in ways that my family could not. My family has supported me 100%, but they couldn't help me with the ins and outs of graduate school. How do you prepare for defense? My poster looks really great to me, but why does it look different than theirs? Other science researchers, that sort of thing. So they helped hone those skills, and that was really important for me at that time. The impacts that this has had on me is that I have finished my thesis and have defended it successfully, and I have now a Master's of Science, which I proudly put after my name. Immediately, I put it after my name on Facebook. So, which informed all my family and many tribes at that point. But when I go home, and I've been home, I was home this whole summer, working for my tribe. And the first time I went out in my field gear, I'd gone out to the field before, but I hadn't gone out as a scientist. I'd gone out as an indigenous scientist, as an indigenous person, as a concerned citizen, all of those things. So we went out to this release, this spill. And I was nervous, and I saw what happened, and it was devastating to me because that's where I'm from, and nobody else wants to be there. No other scientists want to be there and live there, because it's my community. I want to live there. I know it's impacted. I know there's some things that are negative, but that's where I'm from. I got there, and we started, going through things. I pulled down some imagery. I'd analyze that, so we're looking at that, and it hit me. Wow. And it was I just paused, and I thought, I am here to help. I am here to do my job. I'm here to make that difference. And I was doing it. Got in there, looked crazy, got all dirty, and just was in it. And when I got done, I was tired. We hiked and hiked. We looked at things that were so disturbing, places where I had swam, places where my kids had swam, and they weren't probably areas that we could do that anymore right now. And I was able to give them the knowledge that I had. I was able to share with the other consultants and tribal members. Most of the consultants were not Native, and that's okay. But we worked as a team together. Where did I learn how to do that? It was in my lab here. I certainly learned that in life, but I learned it scientifically in my lab. That's what I did. And we got together, we gave each other a high five, and we thought we got a plan, we can go forward, work with the oil companies, and we can get this taken care of. I went home that day and I thought to myself, thank you, Montana State, thank you, Sloan, because you have impacted my land, you've impacted the elders there, the children, and so this funding helped me to stay in school. This funding helped me to support my family, but this funding has such broader effects. This helped me to help my tribe, to help what we say for 7 generations ahead, to make sure that land is in a really good and great place. I plan on going on for my PhD in Earth Sciences. I have formed my committee, and I'm very excited for that to start. It won't start till next fall, doing some work back home. But I just, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Sloan for supporting my tribe, for the environment. And remember, we're north, so everything goes down south. You've affected people down south. And it's the impacts are just too numerous to list, but it has been my honor to share a little bit with you. And again, thank you for the time.
Again, we appreciate the opportunity, and we'll field any questions.
Wow. Thank you. Powerful stories. With due respect to every other presentation we've had over the last day and a half, this may be the most important one. Student success personified in some very difficult situations. Thank you for taking the resources available to you and putting them to good use. Very powerful stories. So at this point, I would open up the floor to any questions or comments from members of the board or folks at the table. President Engstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Thomas, and all of you students. Thank you so much for being here today. I agree with you that this has been a very moving presentation. I, on about a semester basis, meet with groups of Native American students on our campus and talk about student success and barriers to student success. And one of the things that comes up every time is their observation that we don't see role models among the faculty. We don't see Native Americans, with graduate degrees and participating on the faculty, and that's a real problem for us. And so, we've made some efforts in that area and made some really good progress, and Dr. Thomas being one of those additions in recent years. But I think that this Sloan project is the single most important tool that we have to addressing that issue of ultimately getting more Native American faculty members on our campuses. Whether these students become faculty members or go on to other professions with graduate degrees, they will serve as those role models for our undergraduates to see and say, I want to be like Ms. Lone Fight. I want to be like Ms. Tozy and Sprang Jian. Is that how you say it? Yeah. So I think, the function that you are serving as a role model is something that, whether you want to do that or not, you can't avoid that, and it's an important role that you play. This is, in my opinion, absolutely necessarily a collaborative effort. If you look at any of our institutions, the number of Native American students in graduate programs is very small, and so to expect to make much progress on the faculty side of things from your own student cohort, that's a challenging proposition. But by working together, not only the Montana institutions, but with the NSF grant that branches out to other states. That is the way we absolutely have to approach this, sharing each other's students to become faculty members and role models at each other's institution. So I definitely want to say a big thank you to Dr. Thomas and his colleagues at the other schools for leading this effort. And certainly want to say thank you to the intrepid students who are paving the way in this very important effort. I think I will look back on this as one of the most impactful things that we do as a university system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Engstrom. Further comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner, we're now at item B, Substance Abuse Prevention Report.
Mr. Chair, I believe the first item is an EverFi update.
Oh, please, proceed.
Mr. Ron Muffek, Director of Student Affairs for the Montana University System, will provide this update.
Thank you, Dr. Sick. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The EverFi update and then the President's Commission on Substance Abuse update is part of our student affairs agenda. So we're kind of switching gears here from the academic things to the student affairs piece. EverFi is a little bit of background on EverFi for the new members and just to kind of refresh everyone's memory. Last academic year, the MUS began to use the EverFi products. We entered into a contract with EverFi, which is a leader in providing educational materials for non-curricular student success issues. What we had done is we had prioritized as part of the student affairs officers group the issues of alcohol and drug use, sexual assault, and financial literacy as major issues for students outside of the classroom. And then at the Commissioner's office, we had talked about what can we do as a system to address these things. Our campuses are doing a lot of work, but what can we do as a system to impact this? EverFi was the idea that we came up with because it's something that can provide us consistency in the approach to how we address the alcohol issue and the drug use issues and sexual assault and financial literacy. And it also enables our campuses to meet some of the criteria for federal reporting. So I have a one-pager there entitled EverFi Update. I'm going to go through it and just kind of tell you, what is it, what's the purpose of it, who's used it, and what are our next steps. As I said, there's 3 products that we've implemented. Alcohol EDU to address the alcohol and drug use, Haven to address sexual assault awareness, and U of M already has a product, PETSA, that they've been using and they continue to use. And then the third one is the financial literacy product, Transit, that we are implementing this year. Alcohol, EDU, and Haven were the 2 that we really focused on last year, and now we've added the financial literacy piece. Financial literacy piece was rolled out at some campuses last year, but not with the prescriptive requirements that we've added this year. So what's the purpose of this? When you look at the issues, these non-curricular issues that the students are having to deal with, you have a moral imperative to do this. It's the right thing to do. And then if you look at the retention and completion assistance, so many students have issues that cause them to leave school outside of the classroom. EverFi provided us some data as well as Higher One Holdings. Examples, substance abuse is as predictive of student GPA as time spent studying. 70% of students polled said their colleges should increase financial education programs. High-risk drinkers are 8 times more likely to commit sexual assault. So all of these products are connected. They're interconnected and related to address these issues. So we looked at it and said, okay, so what are we trying to accomplish here? We're going to educate our students. We're going to increase their awareness. Hopefully we'll see some behavior changes. And EverFi has some good reporting. They entered a new reporting platform this year, so they're a little bit delayed. I expect to have some additional reports from them. They call them impact reports that will be able to show the pre and post tests of what the students tested out at before and after they completed the products. I should note the products just take about an hour. I think alcohol EDU is the longest one. It's maybe like an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. Haven takes about 45 minutes, and financial literacy transit about 45 minutes. So we have had some pushback from students about having to spend 3 hours completing these products, but we think investing 3 hours before you arrive on campus or shortly after you arrive on campus in order to protect you and educate you is not a lot to be asking of them. Let's see. Oh, another piece of data. Our friends at Indiana University who have been studying nationally, about 38% of their students, they say, are withdrawing because of financial issues, which is why we've added the financial literacy piece. Just going back to the purposes here, once again, behavior changes, communication and consent as it relates to sexual assault. Consequences of alcohol and drug use are the things that we're trying to educate students with. Bystander intervention and risk awareness. Bystander intervention is a big one. Helping students understand when and how to intervene if they see issues going on. Campus policies and available support resources. This is a big one. The EverFi products, we're able to, at the end of the products, provide or customize each product and provide the information for where students can go and get assistance or information from their campuses. And then, as I mentioned, assisting with compliance with Title IX and Clery Act requirements. We're continually seeing more and more requirements from the federal government. This has been particularly helpful for our smaller campuses who don't have the resources that the larger campuses have. And then the final one here is the financial management budgeting, and as I've given you some details on why this is important. So who completed these in the last year, and who's going to complete these products going forward? Really, we had a good number this last academic year. 10,959 students participated in academic year 14-15. That's almost 11,000, obviously. That's not counting the students at U of M that are using PETSA as well. So if you figure there's another couple thousand there, we're looking at 13,000 students that have received alcohol training and sexual assault awareness training in last academic year. 15-16, academic year, we have more prescriptive requirements. We're going to require new students all new students and all transfer students are going to be required to complete these products. And I keep calling them products, they're really tutorials or online education materials that are interactive. Undergraduate and graduate students. And the other piece here that shows how committed we are as a system that students need to complete this is if students don't complete this term, this fall term, registration is going to be held for spring term. So again, that's really a commitment and shows the bold approach that we as a university system are taking in this arena. Of note, we're the only system in the country that has implemented all of the EverFi products as a system. They have 500 campuses across the system or across the country using these products, but no system has implemented it yet. Georgia just signed a contract with EverFi, their system, to follow suit in what we have done. So now we have, after this year, we'll have 2 years of pipeline after this fall, theoretically, and half of our students will have completed the EverFi products. And obviously, it just builds off each other, or off each year. Next year, we'll have almost 3/4, and within 4 years, we'll have every student that's been on campus, or that is on campus, will have completed these products. So what are our next steps? Analysis of data, that's a big one for us. We want to review the impact reports from EverFi. I expect to report to the board when we get this data and be able to show some impact. Now we've got numbers that say, here's how many have completed, but we want to be able to say, okay, they completed it, and before the test they did this, and believe this. After the product, they believe this, and this is how they tested out. So we really expect to have some good data. I don't know if it'll be at the November meeting or maybe the March meeting next year. Climate surveys are another piece that we get from EverFi as part of our contract. Climate surveys are basically surveys that are presented to students related to the climate for sexual assault on a campus and other issues. The federal government is leaning and making quite a bit of noise about requiring campus climate surveys of all Title IV recipient schools. So we expect that to come out during this administration, let's put it that way. U of M already has their own survey, as does MSU, but the smaller campuses, again, don't have the research staff that can put these together and analyze this data. EverFi provides that for us. Under our rape prevention education grant through the Department of Public Health and Human Services, our 4 regional residential 4-years are using the EverFi product as part of as their climate survey. We're going to continue to refine our best practices, and then, as I said, we're going to assess EverFi as a partner and their effectiveness going forward. We have a 2-year contract with them, expires June 30th of 16. We're going to be taking a hard look at other options that are out there. I have looked at a demo from one other competitor of EverFi's, but so far, EverFi is the only one that offers all 3 of these products. And Regent Nystuen might be able to add, EverFi does also provide the financial literacy through a lot of the community banks around Montana. And they also are very involved with our K-12 schools as well in Montana. I think it's, I want to say 180 elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. Is it high schools? Okay. And so they are really committed to, from kindergarten through adulthood, providing these services to individuals. And it actually helps us, the more high schools that are using this, then the students know about EverFi, and they just have a smooth transition into those products. So that's something we're going to have to consider. We're looking at probably December of deciding whether we need to look at other options or not, to give us some 6-7 months to go through the process. So that's my update on EverFi. Certainly stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Muffick. And just to be clear, this has been rolled out system-wide. Is that correct? And every campus of the Montana University system is participating in EverFi?
Chair Test, that is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Regent Nystuen.
Mr. Chair, so what's it cost per course, and does the student pay, or is the university system ultimately paying for the student to take these 3 classes online?
Mr. Chair, Regent Nystuen, the student does not pay anything. This is funded, it was funded through board priority funding last year. It's $90,000 per year for the entire system. We get as I said, we get the 3 products, and we get the climate surveys. Previously, we had a couple campuses that were using a couple of the products on their own. MSU's been using it for about 8 years, I believe, and Montana Tech for about the same period. And they were paying about $50,000 or $60,000 between the 2 of them. So we got some real benefit by coming as a system and saying, all right, we want to buy this together and then give it out to each of the campuses. So we really experienced some cost savings there. If you figured 12,000 students completed, or 11,000 students at $90,000, that's about $8 a student, or a little more, for 3 courses, yeah. So pretty, I would say pretty efficient use of our funds.
Thank you. Additional questions? Additional questions? Comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Tuss. Again, Chair Tuss and members of the board, our next piece is on Montana State University's President's Commission on Substance Abuse Prevention. We have Chris Kearns, the Vice President of Student Success at MSU Bozeman, and Matt Kyrus, the Dean of Students, who will give you an update on this, or a summary on this.
Good morning, Chair Tuss, members of the board. I've been told that we're short on time and that I should keep this brief. This morning it came out at 10 minutes. I'll try to do it in maybe 9 minutes and 45 seconds. As Director of Student Affairs, Ron Muffick indicated, my name is Chris Kearns, and I'm President Vice President Cruzado, Vice President for Student Success at Montana State University. With me today is our Dean of Students, Matt Kyrus. We're here this morning to update you on a conversation our president has asked us to open on our campus, which we believe is pivotal to the welfare and the success of our undergraduates. The topic of that conversation is the draft report for the President's Commission for Substance Abuse Prevention, or what we call PSAP for short, and its 10 draft recommendations. Those recommendations are now open for public comment. Of course, the even larger subject in which we're engaged is how we want to think about and how we want to approach the future of undergraduate support in the arena of substance abuse and general wellness, both of which are critical outcomes. This is an area where this board and Commissioner Christian have already shown remarkable leadership through the supportive programs like Alcohol EDU and the ongoing efforts of the Student Affairs Group led by Ron Muffick. Because of the continuing importance of the topic of alcohol and substance abuse prevention, President Cruzado asked that the relevant issues be studied by a cross-section of our campus and our community members in order to make recommendations for her review. The draft report which resulted and on which we've invited public comment can be found in our Division of Student Success website. The link to that report is listed both at the bottom of this slide and in the one-page handout that we've distributed to board members. Anyone wishing to do so can leave input on the website regarding the draft recommendations they will find there. One of the first things considered in the draft report is why we should take up this question of substance abuse prevention at the campus level now. Why should this be a priority at this time? After all, we're not facing a crisis or a campus tragedy, and those are the kinds of motivations that typically move a campus to engage in work like this. When you read the report, you'll see that it begins with a statement of purpose that says it is precisely because we are not being driven by contingent circumstances that we can choose to be proactive in addressing this perennial student wellness issue. Thanks to a number of programs, technologies, and partnerships, we've just heard about some of them, developed in recent years, many of which are driven or supported by the board and by the commissioner. We now have the opportunity to take the time and to gather the input needed to adapt an even more proactive leadership position in substance abuse prevention. As this slide details, the President's Commission includes a cross-section of faculty, students, community partners, and university experts. We're particularly pleased by the involvement of students and community representatives in these deliberations, and we want to continue those engagements as we move forward. The group constituting PSAP was charged by President Cruzado to provide advice about advancing two closely related goals. The first goal is to reduce harm related to substance abuse. The second goal is to improve the health and safety of our students through our efforts to improve substance abuse prevention. In order to provide the recommendations requested, the President's Commission consulted widely with a variety of stakeholding groups and individuals as they work to identify both the substance abuse challenges we face and also the most promising strategies for addressing those challenges. In the course of its work, PSAP consulted with national experts and colleagues who could provide information on the best practices about how to optimize campus wellness. This was action-oriented research, inasmuch as their goal was to produce a report that would set the stage for better substance abuse prevention policies and programs. The President's Commission looked at a range of substance abuse-related data spanning both the national and the local levels. The 2012 numbers, which PSAP reviewed from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, were particularly striking, as you can see in this slide. These figures, which have since been updated, connect alcohol abuse with consequences ranging from poor academic performance to student death. And they provide an important context for what we continue to find in our locally based data. At the conclusion of all of PSAP's preliminary work, its consideration of the professional literature and best practices, its analysis of local and national data, and its extensive interviews and consultations among a variety of experts, the President's Commission identified 10 topics for which they have produced draft recommendations. The first 5 of these topics are listed here on this slide, and they're also on your handout along with a description of the other recommendations, 6 through 10. Some of these draft recommendations are fairly straightforward and are already underway, while others are likely to spark broader conversation and even media attention. Although we're eager to engage in conversation about any and all of the draft recommendations as we move forward, we anticipate that much of the initial attention will focus on 3 of these draft recommendations. The first is draft recommendation number 1, as listed on this slide, which calls for the creation of a campus and community coalition as a space in and through which to do the ongoing work that has been envisioned by the Commission. Another draft recommendation that we feel is likely to draw a lot of interest, and in fact has begun to do so, is seen on this slide, and it calls for us to consider, it's recommendation number 8, it calls for us to consider how we deal with alcohol during MSU football games. Do we have the right mix of policies around tailgating and how we manage the sale of alcohol at football games, or can we make improvements? The draft report calls for us to study this important issue. The final draft recommendation, likely to attract attention at the outset, is number 10, listed on this slide as well. It asks if we should open a conversation regarding Montana privacy law with respect to parental notification. Montana is one of only 2 states, Oregon is the other, whose privacy standards for parental notification are stricter than the federal standards. What this means for folks in my business is that our campuses can't look to families to partner with us in helping students in crisis in the same way that we can do in almost all campuses from other states around the country. Now, perhaps this is the approach we want to take here in Montana, but PSAP suggests we examine this question. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that this is truly a draft document. In most of its recommendations, the President's Commission calls for study and dialogue about how to draw on our very best thinking about how to minimize the harm associated with substance abuse, and whether we're talking about drugs or we're talking about alcohol. You can see in this slide the next steps that are underway in Bozeman. We're still in the input stage for these draft recommendations, and we want to ensure that our community members and partners have ample time to respond. So we're meeting with and listening to as many groups as we can, while also seeking electronic input from those who either cannot or prefer not to attend one of our public forums. Because of the importance of this topic and the leadership that you continue to embody, we also wanted to be sure that the members of this board and the Commissioner's Office were fully aware of the conversations underway, and we want to invite your advice and counsel as part of the larger community of which we're all members. Thank you. Would take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I'd just say congratulate you on this work. This has certainly been important. Thanks, President Cruzado, for undertaking this task. I guess the first thing that came to mind when I saw this draft a while back was, how does this apply to the system? And why they're here today is just for that. I certainly wanted to get it introduced to the board, and then in consideration across our system. I think it's good work. I don't know if one size necessarily will fit all, but there's a body of understanding there that will apply to all. And some of the policies that could be generated out of this, including sporting events, and some of those I think likely have sort of implications across, whether we like it or not. And so I just felt like we need to elevate it to this level and encourage a system-wide approach to this. So I appreciate the work that's been done.
What is your anticipated timeline on the next steps?
Chair Tuss, members of the board, we're seeking input right now to finalize the draft. We want to leave that timeline open for as long as we need to. Once the draft is completed, you'll see that most of the recommendations call for increased study and conversations with our stakeholders. I would imagine that will take the balance of the year if we move in that direction. But so we want to make sure that we get this right. The draft report opens with a saying that actually comes from my grandfather, who was a lifelong farmer, and he said the time to fix the roof is before it's raining. And so we have the time right now because it's not raining. We want to get as much input as we can and be very thoughtful before moving forward. So I would say the balance of the year would be spent in study, but we will see what the input tells us.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to want to get this right. I think that's very, very important. Further comments or conversation about this? Questions? Regent Holman.
Just a very brief comment. I want to congratulate you and President Cruzado on being proactive in this, and I think some may disagree with me on this or not prefer that I not say it, but I think we can all agree that substance abuse and alcohol use goes hand in hand with the college experience. And I think that at times there's nothing wrong with some of that, but I think what we're seeing is excessive use of that and dangerous use of that, like perhaps we haven't seen before. And I think also, I know actually, that anything we can do to mitigate that and mitigate the dangers with that and encourage responsible activities are really good, and being proactive on that, I think will help out our students across the entire state. So thank you.
Thank you. President Cruzado.
Yes. Regent Haas, members of the board, thank you so much for allowing us an opportunity to bring this to your attention. Several things I want to mention. This group, which is a large group, which includes faculty and students and staff and merchants and alumni, have been working for about 3 years now, over 30 months. I want to make sure that even though there are some recommendations here for further study that can catch our attention, that we don't focus our attention just on those two. There are very good recommendations here that are very, very important, very, very proactive about how do we build a sense of community? How do we strengthen those collaborations between town and gown? How do we make sure that our merchants feel that they are as responsible for our students as we do feel that we're responsible for our students? There are new ways for us to take a look at our mentors, at our residence dorms. How do we use every vehicle and avenue that we have to disseminate accurate information in a way that our students can be open to receiving that information? And finally, even though I noticed that at least one headline said that we were going to implement these changes, I want to reinforce the message that this is a draft. And it's a draft that proposes further studies. And there will be a yes or a no as a possible answer. And we are not coming to the table with a predisposed answer. We just want to make sure that we open that conversation and that we listen to our different constituencies. I have been in some of those meetings with city officials, with some of our alumni, with boosters clubs, and it's just amazing the good amount of information that we have heard. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm already feeling that this has generated a level of enthusiasm and perhaps more importantly, a sense of we are all in this together. We're going to provide our students with the tools that they need to be successful in the classroom, but perhaps more importantly, in their lives. So I want to thank you all for listening to these recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Cruzado. I also think it's important to note this is in direct response to an expectation that we have at this board, that we take student safety very seriously, not just our flagship institutions, but at all of the institutions of the university system. So you're on the right track and continue to apprise us of the progress that you're making on this very important issue. Further comments or questions from members of the board? Dr. Sack?
Yes, I just want to thank Dr. Kearns and Dr. Kairos for their incredible work on this and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Dr. Sack, online learning report?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, each September we bring to you an update of the online programs in the state of Montana. This began when online programs were fairly new. They're fairly standard now, but as you can see, we have an excellent array of online programs in the state.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Thank you, Dr. Sack. Accreditation report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board,
You'll find an accreditation report. It's a simple report showing that all campuses are on schedule with their NWCCU review schedule. We had 3 campuses complete their Year 7 evaluation: Great Falls College MSU, Dawson Community College, and Miles Community College. Currently, all campuses are accredited by NWCCU and have transitioned to the new 7-year accreditation cycle and revised standards.
Regent Nystuen? Oh, I'm sorry. Regent Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Tuss. Are there any communications that we receive in connection with the accreditation reports that comment on the accreditation or raise any questions or issues that we should be aware of?
Mr. Chair, Regent Johnstone, the Commissioner's Office does receive copies of the accreditation reports, and those reports are pretty standard at this point, so no major issues have been raised.
Further questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. Level 2 memorandum.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have before you several Level 2 items for the first reading. These items have been thoroughly vetted by the chief academic officers. They were discussed on the ARSA committee call on Monday of this week. And so if you would like, sir, I can walk you through each of these items.
Please.
The first item is from Montana State University. It's a request for authorization to establish an Extreme Gravity Institute. The Extreme Gravity Center will focus on the physics of the extreme gravity environment and will be unique in the world. The center will bring together world experts, provide STEM outreach to youth across the state, and increase the quality of MSU's current graduate program in astrophysics. The research cluster has more than 40-year history of external funding success.
Conversation about this item? Questions? Seeing none, proceed.
Mr. Chair, the next 2 items from Great Falls College MSU are quite simple. The first is a request for authorization to rename the Division of Outreach. And the second item from Great Falls College MSU is a request for authorization of the reorganization of academic affairs, including the renaming of the divisions of Business, Trades, Technology to the Division of Trades and Division of General Education and Transfer to the Division of General Education, Business, Technology, and Transfer. It's basically part of an internal reorganization in the college.
Comments or questions about these 2 proposals from Great Falls College? Comments or questions about these proposals? Seeing none, proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the next item is from the University of Montana. It's a request for authorization to create the Baucus Institute. The Baucus Institute is proposed as a multidisciplinary public policy center that focuses on many issues that were important to Ambassador Baucus when he was the U.S. Senator. Areas such as economic development, healthcare, tax policy, and environment. It will be administered through the Alexander Blewett III School of Law and will involve faculty and programs in business, forestry, and conservation, education, and health professions across the university. Some of the programming plan will include student fellows, faculty fellows, selected international programs, and an eventual Baucus faculty chair. And scholarly use of the Baucus papers will be archived in the Mansfield Library. And Mr. Chair, I believe President Engstrom would like to make an introduction at this point.
President Engstrom.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Seck, Chair Tuss, members of the board. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our brand new Dean of the Alexander Blewett III School of Law. He was not here yesterday during introductions, but he is here today. And so Paul Kurgis is in the back of the room there. Paul joined us in July, and he comes to us from St. John's University, where he was on the faculty there. And he comes from a long line of law school administrators. His father was the dean of a school of law as well. So we're delighted to have Dean Kurgis here with us today, but at the University of Montana to help lead this new effort as well as many of the other innovations at the School of Law. Paul, thanks for being here. Welcome.
On this particular proposal, I would just say how incredibly impressed I am. I'm glad that this is before us. And I mentioned this on the ARSA call that we had, I believe it was late last week, the interdisciplinary nature of this. And when I first thought of this and I saw the original proposal, given that it was housed at the law school, in my mind I was thinking, well, this is going to be law school stuff. It's clearly not. It really is the depth and breadth of really the career, the public career of Senator and now Ambassador Baucus. And I think this is a wonderful proposal. And I thank you for bringing this for us. And I think it's going to bear fruit for the University of Montana and the entire state of Montana if we approve this. Regent Johnstone.
Thank you, Chair. I would have two observations. First of all, I do think the Baucus proposal is very exciting. I'm actually introducing Ambassador Baucus a week from now in New York for another organization that I'm involved in, the securities industry. So he's been a longtime friend, and I think this could have great value to the law school. But on a broader observation and comment, I guess, is and it really relates to the third element of our strategic plan, which is efficiency and effectiveness. And I think everyone in the room appreciates the challenges we have now and we're likely to have going into the future with respect to funding our university system. And I would hope that as the campuses look to change, and higher education must be dynamic, the circumstances change, opportunities are created. We need to be responsive to that and be willing to change and look for opportunities. But the other side of that equation is we've got to fund them. And there is a direct, in my mind, relationship between being fiscally responsible and efficient and preserving quality in our educational system. And I don't think we can be all things to all people and still preserve quality. So as we go forward, and we've got lots of these proposals that come up to us, and by the time they get here, they've been vetted by a lot of folks. But I hope everyone that's involved in that vetting process, including university administration, keeps in mind we've got to make that balance. There is a balance between financial stability and quality, and there may have to be some trade-offs in order to assure that we achieve both.
Thank you. Further comments, questions? Comments or questions? Regent Albrecht.
I just had a question about, related to Regent Johnstone's question about the sustainability of this program. Can someone speak to that?
Regent Albrecht, members of the board, be happy to speak to it. Could you just tell me a little bit more, though, about what you're asking? I'm not quite sure.
Well, just the financial implications, the financial stability or sustainability of the program.
Okay, thank you, Regent Albrecht. Essentially, the activities around this program are envisioned to be funded almost entirely by private sources over the long run. And so as we put in place the Baucus Fellows at the student level, the endowed chair, the endowed Baucus chair, and the other programmatic aspects of this, we will put those in place using primarily, almost entirely, donations in the form of endowments. And so these will be set up as sustainable endowments where we will fund the activities off of the interest income or the interest revenue from those endowments. So that's really the financial plan, is to set it up primarily as an endowment set of activities.
And we have some of those funds already, correct?
We are in the beginning stages of the fundraising, Regent Albrecht. It's difficult to go out to donors and talk about a center until it's approved. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg aspect to this. I understand that. I think it's not unlike, if I could look at a precedent that you approved last spring, the center, I don't remember the exact name of it, but the mental health center that we approved last spring as a board, with the notion that that would help Montana State University generate grant funds and so on. And my understanding is that it has already done that, and it's played a key role in the research things that you did yesterday. A little bit the same situation. We need to have this institute in place, the vision in place, and approved by you before we can solidify those donations. We certainly have been in the process of talking to many people about them, and so I think now with this approval, that will really give us the key we need to go out and finalize these things. Thank you.
Further questions or comments from the board? Okay. Seeing none, we have one more item, Dr. Sack.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the final item from the University of Montana is for the request for authorization to create a Center for Integrated Research on the Environment, CIRI. CIRI is proposed to house the activities of Army Corps of Engineers Cooperative Agreement. The Corps Agreement involves multiple areas of research involving properties, artifacts, and policies of the Department of Defense, such as the land management, fish and wildlife geospatial modeling, cultural resources, law and policy, and ecological restoration. The agreement is a multi-million-dollar and multi-year agreement. The focus of CIRI is the administration of agreement with faculty scholars drawn from across the university.
Thank you. President Engstrom.
Thank you, Chair Tuss. If I could just make a quick comment on this one, it's sort of the opposite situation to what I just described for the Baucus Institute. This one, the money is coming in, and it has been for the last year and a half, and this is an administrative structure really to coordinate those activities through this Army Corps of Engineer project. Professor Rick Hauer is here in the audience, and he informed me just before coming in here that the cumulative total of the work done through this cooperative agreement is already reached and exceeded the $25 million mark as of just this month, really. So this is something where the funding is rolling down the track in large measure, and so this is really the administrative structure to handle that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Engstrom. Further comment or conversation? Seeing none. Further comment or conversation about level 2 memorandum in total? Seeing none, let's proceed to notifications and level 1 approvals. Dr. Sack.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, level 1 proposals are those that involve minor changes and may be approved by the commissioner. The process first involves the vetting of the campuses via the chief academic officer. So the items before you have been thoroughly vetted by the chief academic officers and were reviewed at the ARSA call just a few days ago. I would be happy to try and answer any questions you may have about these items. They're pretty simple.
Thank you, Dr. Sack. Any questions of Dr. Sack? Any questions from the board? Seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Sack. I believe that now completes the agenda for this particular committee, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Chair?
Dr. Sack.
This sort of relates to ARSA, but it also connects with the two-year committee discussion on workforce yesterday. But I wanted to mention, and you may have read in the paper this morning that the Whitehall-based Barrick Gold and Sunlight Mine has announced it's laying off 140 people. And I just wanted to share that Dr. Kirk Lacey is already working as we speak with the Department of Labor and Industry and the two-year campuses surrounding that mine, which include Gallatin College, Highlands College, and Helena College, to provide rapid response for those workers who will be laid off.
Thank you. Further conversation from members of the board before we move on? Dr. Seth, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the action items of the agenda. And it is my intent to go in the order that they were presented to us, beginning with yesterday's agenda. So let us move to there's nothing that we have under the two-year committee. That was an information agenda yesterday. And let's go to the budget committee. We have a number of consent items, items A through E on the consent agenda for under the budget committee. Is there a motion to approve these consent items? There's a motion by Regent Johnstone. Is there any further conversation? Regent Johnstone.
Just so I'm sure what I just moved, we're on the budget, right?
Yes. Consent, the consent items A through E in the budget committee. Correct. Is there any further conversation by members of the board, by the campuses, or the public on these consent items? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. The motion passes. We will now move to the action items under the budget committee agenda, and we will begin with item A, fiscal year 2016 operating budgets. Is there a motion?
I would so move.
You've heard the motion by Regent Johnstone. I would open the floor for conversation. Regent Johnstone.
Yes. I move the motion and I approve favorable action on this. I think the budget is consistent with our strategic plan, supports our strategic plan relative to access, affordability, workforce development, and efficiency and effectiveness. I think it's a responsible budget relative both to our resources and what we're trying to achieve. So I support approval of it. We heard yesterday a comment that suggested that we should not approve the budget relative to Dawson Community College. I do not favor making that exception. I think the appropriate response to the issues raised would be for the commissioner to discuss those issues with the college administration and the board of the college and report back to us at the November meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Johnstone. Regent Nystuen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would I hate to use the word second the things that Regent Johnstone just mentioned about Dawson Community College. I think it's incumbent upon the leadership, especially most notably the Board of Trustees of Dawson, to work with the challenges at hand. As locally elected officials, I think they and the administration and interim president Mix really address this in an effort to reverse the trends that we're seeing in enrollment and some of the fiscal challenges that you're having here. I remember a number of years ago when the Board of Regents, they're not here anymore, but they occupied a couple seats here and they voted against a FECC budget. And you know what, as a trustee of that college, I really bristled, as did President Karras and a few of my colleagues, that would occur, knowing that a lot of work went into vetting the process with the budget and trying to understand what was happening with their local community and so forth. And so out of courtesy to that board, I think it's important that we give them the space and the latitude and the encouragement to proceed with refining their budget as student enrollment and FTE come online, and that they can understand more about what's happening with their student population and within the community. So I think we, as the Montana University system, need to send the message loud and clear that we have your back. We want the encouragement of our encouragement to you to say we're in the education business together. We win together or we struggle together. And I guess I'd like to encourage this board and Commissioner Christian to make this a priority as we go forward here, to provide the resources and assistance we have available from this body to assist our friends and colleagues over in Glendive. So with that, I'd say keep your board really engaged in this process and let us know what our role is. I always remember my years on the board of FECC. Our job as here at the Regents is to coordinate and supervise. We are not in a management nor control position of the community colleges. We're working together on this, and I think by allowing this budget to go through as stated in the package here, we are providing that supervisory review of what's going on here and coordination. But we're not managing and controlling your college in Glendive and Miles City nor in Kalispell. So with that, I'm going to vote favorably towards this budget, including in line with what Regent Johnstone suggested.
Thank you, Regent Nystuen. And I'm assuming that this will occur with a fair degree of dispatch with regard to that particular board, that institution, and the Commissioner's Office working together on this very important issue. Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Christian.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say we already have started that process, quite candidly. I've sent a few letters. Deputy Commissioner Seck has been in contact, visited with President Nix on the phone. We share those challenges and concerns, and we take that role seriously, and we'll continue to try to provide what support we can. I certainly hear and understand the charge from Regent Johnstone, and we'll continue to do that in earnest to make sure that we're there as best we can, helping to assist that college and their local board getting through these difficult times, making certain that they have a financial plan that is sustainable, and making certain that in that plan quality is maintained. And I do believe that is part of that oversight charge, and we'll take that seriously to work with those that campus to make certain that occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Regent Albrecht.
Commissioner Christian, what will that look like for us as far as maintaining an understanding of the process of what's going on there, so that we can be assured that things are being handled well? And certainly these are difficult times, but requiring some difficult discussions moving forward, and I see those as opportunities to sometimes make some difficult plans moving forward. But that's certainly an opportunity, and I would like for you to keep us abreast on what that would look like, if you could just explain that information process.
Mr. Chair, Regent Albrecht, I think that process, as I mentioned, has begun. I think we share the concern that through this sort of right-sizing effort, the quality is maintained. That is my paramount concern, and I guess in brief, that's what my letter referenced. Difficult times for certain. We just have to make sure, especially with Common Course numbering, that what is adopted into the system is what we expect. We have no reason to believe that it's not. We've not seen anything in the past that indicates that it's not. But as any company tries to right size, that shift is a significant one. I think that the concerns raised by Mr. Farrow are valid, and we'll look into that further. And I think, as Regent Johnstone requested, we'll report back to this board in November with how that progress is going.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further comments by members of the board? Further comments? Regent Nystuen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. So, Interim President Nix is in. You're the interim president right now. could you refresh us again on what's happening with the naming of a full-time president? Is that search going on? Kind of where are we in the process, or where are you in that process, I should say?
President Nix, if I understand this right, you were appointed, though, for at least a year, is that right?
11 months.
Yeah.
July 27th.
So the anticipation is that sort of time frame.
Further comments or questions from members of the board? Further comments or questions from members of the board? Comments or questions from the campuses or the public? Additional comments from the public or campuses? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion by Regent Johnstone, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're now on item B, request for authorization to appoint members to the Fire Services Training Advisory Council, MSU Cooperative Extension Service. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Albrecht to approve this item. Is there additional conversation by members of the board, by the campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item C, request for authorization to purchase property by MSU Bozeman. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved by Regent Johnstone. Is there further conversation or questions? Regent Nystuen.
Refresh me again, if you would, thank you, Mr. Chair, that about the financing. Is the financing going to be potentially a bank-financed opportunity on this one, or is it the next one?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, Regent Nystuen, it is both, is the answer. And we combined, the second one combines those two requests into one financing package, so we don't have the expense of financing twice. Not that we don't like to see banks get origination fees and that sort of thing, but.
Well, that brings up the point is, you know, while the bank that I manage won't be directly involved in it, my company could. So I'm wondering, for sake of here, if I should abstain from the vote on approving especially the financing piece of this. What's been the protocol for these types of, I just don't want to get in a conflict situation.
Regent Nystuen, if you believe that there's a potential conflict of interest for you, it would be up to you to make that decision if you want to abstain from this vote, and it'll be so recorded. You would like to abstain?
Yeah, I think I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's perfectly fine. At this point, we're approving the issuance of debt. No bank has bid on it at this time or anything else, but that certainly could be a piece. This particular item authorizes the purchase of that property. The next item will combine the financing piece for both this and the parking garage.
Okay, therefore I think I'll vote for this one, but abstain on this next for point of order.
Regent Johnson?
Well, I guess I would just ask, I'm not aware that we're the financial advisor for the university. We would have liked to have been, but I don't think we are. Is that true? Thank you.
Further conversation? Further conversation? Further conversation from members of the board, from the campuses or the public? Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are now on action item D, request for authorization to execute financing for the construction of parking facility and purchase of lab office facilities by MSU Bozeman. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Johnstone. Further conversation by members of the board? Is there further comments by the public or the campuses? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Any abstentions? You will be recorded as an abstention. Regent Nystuen. Thank you very much. The motion passes. Let us now proceed to the Staff and Compensation Committee. There are a number of items on here that are all under the consent agenda. Is there a motion to move the consent agenda?
I would so move with the exception of items D, E, F, and G in the labor agreement section of the consent agenda.
The motion by Regent Johnstone is to move the consent agenda for our Staff and Compensation Committee with the exception of items D, E, F, and G. Is there further conversation by members of the board? Is there further conversation by campuses or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We will now proceed to the Academic Research and Student Affairs Committee agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
The consent agenda has been moved by Regent Albrecht. Is there any conversation by members of the board? Any conversation by the public or the campuses? Any comments by the campuses or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. We are now on action item A, Prior Learning Assessment Policy 301.19 by OCHI. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Regent Homan. Is there any further conversation by members of the board? Any comment by the public or campuses? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. Action item B, revision to policy 401.1, consulting services, faculty, Office of Commissioner of Higher Education. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Regent Nystuen. Is there further conversation by members of the board? Any further conversation? Are there comments from campuses or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. We're on action item C, mission statement and vision statement revision for the Great Falls College MSU. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Albrecht. Further conversation by members of the board? Seeing none, is there further conversation by the campuses or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. Thank you very much. We now have, next on the agenda, we have 2 student appeals. Members of the board, you have each received the commissioner's decision on these appeals and the written appeal with supporting documents submitted by the students. The issue before the board in each of these is solely to determine whether to hear the appeal at a later meeting. Board of Regent policy does not require the board to entertain these appeals if we are satisfied with the commissioner's review and decision. These appeals are confidential, so we will not be addressing the student by name or even identifying the campus involved, nor will we address the facts or the specific issues today. The sole issue today is whether any regent believes the issues addressed in the commissioner's decision needs further review at the board level. If you do not wish to hear the appeal at the Board of Regent level, it is not necessary to make a motion. A lack of action on our part will signify our decision not to hear the case. Are there any general questions as to this procedure before we go to the appeal? Seeing none, for student appeal number 1, I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. There being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied. The Commissioner's decision is upheld. We will now proceed to student appeal number 2, and I will now entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. There being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied. The Commissioner's decision is upheld. We will now move to faculty appeal number 1, MSU. You have each received the Commissioner's decision and the written appeal with supporting documents submitted to you by the faculty member. The issue before the board in this particular case is solely to determine whether to hear the appeal at a later meeting. Board of Regent policy does not require the board to entertain this appeal if we are satisfied with the Commissioner's review and decision. This appeal is confidential, so we will not be addressing the faculty member by name, nor will we address the facts or the specific issues today. The sole issue today is whether any regent believes the issues addressed in the Commissioner's decision needs further review at the board level. If you do not wish to hear the appeal at the Board of Regent level, it is not necessary to make a motion. A lack of action on our part will signify our decision not to hear the case. Are there any general questions as to this procedure before we go to the appeal? Seeing none, we will move to faculty appeal number 1, and I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. There being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied, and the Commissioner's decision is upheld. I will now open the floor to public comment. Is there any public comment on any item whatsoever? I see somebody moving up to the podium. Public comment. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Tuss, members of the board. My name is Cody Meixner. I serve as the president of the Associated Students of the University of Montana. And I want to first thank you for your commitment to the Montana University system, and especially to the students that attend each of our fantastic institutions. Your service does not go unnoticed by the students, and let me say on their behalf how much it is appreciated. Our ASUM Senate recently passed a resolution in support of a large-scale solar panel project that would provide covered parking on campus, produce 10% of our university's annual electrical needs, save the university approximately $200,000 per year for the next 40 years, and has the potential to be completely funded by a third-party investor. Commissioner Christian mentioned this resolution briefly yesterday, and I wanted to take just a little time to speak to you about it now. We have received from Western Renewable Energy a complimentary feasibility study which determined where these panels would fit best, and the numbers I gave to you just a moment ago. This project would provide covered parking for 3 different lots at UM, which is something students are very much in support of, independent of these awnings producing energy from solar. The ASUM Sustainability Center, in coordination with the university's sustainability director, conducted surveys of the student body to determine support of both covered parking as well as tangible solar projects on campus. The resounding opinion was yes, students are in favor of both. The next step is to work on a project development package with Western Renewable Energy. This would come with an upfront investment on the university's part of $400,000 to $500,000. This project development package would determine the specifics of the project, the exact numbers of panels, the parking spaces which would be covered, the exact tilt of the solar panels, and the other fine details. Let me speak a little bit why this is so time sensitive. I don't pretend to completely grasp the complexities of the tax codes that deal with these types of investments, but what I do know after many meetings with faculty and staff and students on our campus is that tax incentives are in place now and expire at the end of 2016 that highly incentivize the funding of this project by a third-party investor. The longer we wait, the less likely we are to find an investor. Luckily, Western Renewable Energy has many connections with investment bankers that are looking for projects like this, and we've been in direct contact with a few of them. The investor is incentivized to not only pay for the complete $25 million project, but to also reimburse the university for that initial project development investment. According to the professionals at our university, the investor could likely make up to $5 million worth of tax credits within 8 years of the completion of this project, in addition to their return on the initial $25 or so million. This is a great reason to invest in this project, but we have to act now. The investor cannot take advantage of these tax credits unless we break ground before the end of 2016. I'd respectfully request that this be presented as an action item at your meeting in Bozeman 2 months from now. At that meeting, the students, faculty, and staff that have developed this plan will be in attendance and are much more qualified to speak to the specifics of this innovative proposal and this once-in-a-lifetime chance to construct a large-scale solar panel array on one of our campuses at no cost to the Montana University system. However, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now on behalf of UM students.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there additional public comment to come before the board at this time? Additional public comment? Any additional public comment? President Cruzado.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I just need to say that recognize some of our campuses. It was about 3 years ago that our MSU Northern Campus, ever the leader, created a new fad in our meetings by establishing a snack room, candy store-like. And then we have followed suit, right? And then there was Great Falls MSU College, which came up with this wonderful popcorn bar. And then what to say about our wonderful Helena College with that wonderful opportunity that we have to enjoy Cheetos. And then I just need to say, Chancellor Blackketter, having these wonderful chocolate bars, you have really set a new high for our meetings. And I think this is just a way for all of us to say thank you so much to you, your wife, your staff, for a wonderful hospitality during this meeting. And I look forward to hosting all of you in Bozeman in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chancellor?
Chair Tuss, I'm looking around the room. Of course, as you know, chancellors don't do much of the work for events like this. Are they around? Who's around from Montana Tech that's been working? One guy in the back, some students over here. Carmen Nelson, Tom Ferreter, Chris Van Newland in the Student Union building. If you see those people, just kind of pat them on the back a little bit, because it is a big job, as we all know, and we're happy to host the meeting, but I would like to recognize the staff here at Montana Tech. They do an exceptional job.
And for the record, President Cruzado, of course, you know that the next Board of Regent meeting will be hosted on your campus in Bozeman. I can't wait to see what the hospitality room looks like.
Could it be a barbecue bar? That would be good, yeah. Think about it.
Are there any additional public comments? Any additional public comments? Any additional public comments? Seeing none and knowing that there is no further business to come before this board, we stand adjourned. Thank you.